doing?
Oh, good.
Hey, please.
Of the Coventry School Committee, could we, and I have 5:32, could we have a roll call, please, Donna?
Yep. Kathy Patnode,
Here.
Dave Florio,
Yeah.
Luke Murray,
Here.
Donna Colonian,
Here.
James Pearson,
Here.
Craig Levis.
Here.
I believe that's it. John and Sarah are not here, correct?
No,
Okay.
Don should be here, but he's struggling getting in, so we'll hopefully meet him in executive session.
Okay.
Madam Chair, I make a motion that the committee recess into executive session at 5:32 p.m.
I second the motion.
to consider matters specifically relating to student matters, approval of minutes, potential litigation, personnel matters, and homeschool requests.
I second the motion.
Thank you, Donna.
You're welcome, Dave.
Could we have a roll call vote, please, Donna?
Kathy Patnode,
Yes.
Dave Florio,
Yes.
Luke Murray,
Yes.
Donna Colonian,
Yes.
James Pearson.
Yes.
All right, we are going to recess to executive session, and we'll meet everybody in open session after we're finished. Thank you, everyone.
Okay.
We want to reconvene the open session of the Coventry School Committee. Welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining us this evening. I would like us to have a moment of silence as we consider the work before us this evening. Thank you. Also, I just want to make a comment that we're sorry that we're so delayed coming back out into the open session, and I hope we haven't caused anybody any undue anxiety waiting for us. That being said, Mr. Florio, I believe you are going to do the honors of reading the mission statement for Coventry Public Schools.
Dave, you're on mute.
Dave, you're on mute.
Yeah, there we go. There we go. Thank you, Madam Chair. The mission of the Coventry Public Schools is to inspire, support, and challenge all students to an inclusive community to be critical thinkers, effective communicators, reflective learners, responsible individuals, and global citizens.
Thank you so much, Mr. Florio. And just to notify the public, the school committee met in executive session for about a half hour, actually more than that. I guess it was more like an hour. And we discussed various things. We had 2 votes that we took, approval of our homeschool requests and the executive minutes from 6/11. Both those votes were unanimous and were carried 5-0. That being said, is there a motion to vote to seal the minutes of the executive session?
Madam Chair, I make a motion that the records of the executive session be kept closed pursuant to 42-46-4 and 42-46-5.
I second the motion.
Thank you very much. Could we have a roll call vote on that, please?
Kathy Patnode,
Yes.
Dave Florio,
Yes.
Luke Murray,
Yes.
Donna Colonian,
Yes.
James Pearson.
Yes.
Thank you. Motion carries 5-0. Moving on to agenda item number 5, which is our consent agenda. Reference number 1, the approval of our minutes. Is there a motion?
Madam Chair, I make a motion to approve the consent agenda as presented/amended.
I second the motion.
Any questions from the committee? Seeing none, could we have a roll call vote, please?
Kathy Patnode,
Yes.
Dave Florio,
Yes.
Luke Murray,
Yes.
Donna Colonian,
Yes.
James Pearson.
Yes.
Thank you. Motion carries 5-0. Moving on into the public agenda. During the public agenda, citizens who are attending this meeting will be allowed to ask questions before a motion is taken. We will, after a motion is taken, before we call for the vote, it will go back out to the public so that they can ask questions, and they can do that by raising their hands, and will be unmuted by our Director of Technology, Mr. Murphy. That being said, I think Mr. Levis, was number 6 tabled?
No, I think number 6 I have is
Okay.
recognition of Mr. Coward and Mr. Murphy. Is that what we're talking
Yes.
about?
Yes.
No, I just wanted to acknowledge publicly that, Mr. Coward is been appointed as the Assistant Superintendent for Coventry Public Schools, and that Mr. Murphy, Jim Murphy, was filling as the interim. He's now been appointed as the Director of Technology and Information Systems. So it's the first time that I've had an opportunity to publicly acknowledge them at a school committee meeting. So I want to thank them for all the work that they've done for this community, and congratulate them on their positions.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Levis. I'm going to start with Mr. Florio. Did you want to make any comments
Sure.
on this matter?
Sure. Thank you, Don. And thank you, Jim. Jim, you did an outstanding job, especially when with the Bitcoin episode and the putting together the records and personnel records of a lot of individuals in town. And Don, you've been doing an outstanding job, and I'm very proud of you, Don. You have done a great job, a really good job, and I thank you both. You're both great men, and we'd be lost without both of you. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Florio. Mr. Murray, did you have any comments or whatever?
Yeah, I'll just keep it brief. Congratulations, gentlemen. You've done a great job for the district, and congratulations on the promotion. It's going to come with a whole new bag of work, but I'm sure you're up to the task. So thanks for sticking with us, and I wish you the best in your new positions.
Thank you, Mr. Murray. Mrs. Colonian?
Well, I think you both did a great job over the past few years. Don, this is a long time coming. I'm really happy for you. And Jim, you've worked very, very hard to keep us safe, cyberly, that is. So congratulations to both of you.
Thank you. And finally, Mr. Pearson?
Congratulations to you both. Looking forward to working with you more. So good job.
And finally, my congratulations to both of you. I think you both know how I feel. I couldn't be happier for both of you and for our district. And I look forward to future endeavors and working with you. But I couldn't ask for a better couple of employees to be promoted. So congratulations. And so before we move on, I don't know if either of you wanted to say anything, or if you want to see if there are any people in our community that would like to say a few words.
Well,
You were
I'll just say-
speaking to, I'm sorry, go ahead.
I'll just say thank you. Everybody said such kind things about both of us, and we work well together. We work well as a team. We all make each other look good. So I'm just happy to have the opportunity to continue working as part of the administrative team.
I'll kind of just echo what Don said. I appreciate the consideration. And I look forward to working with everybody. And looks like we do have one hand from the crowd.
I see that.
Okay. Amanda, if you could just state your name for the record.
Hi, it's Amanda Aldana. And I just want to say congratulations, especially to you, Mr. Cowart. You know, I was there when you were the principal at Washington Oak, and well deserved. We could not ask for anybody better to come in and be the assistant superintendent. So congratulations, and congratulations to you as well, Mr. Murphy. Well done. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Aldana.
Thank you.
We have anybody else, Mr. Murphy?
That is it.
All right. I see that some people are doing some chatting, so hopefully you're able to see those remarks from folks. So moving on to number 7, which is recalls from layoff. Mr. Levis, did you want to speak to this before we
Yeah,
make a motion?
just quickly that we had, they had a quick job fair today. So because of that, we're able to recall a teacher, and hopefully next school committee meeting, hopefully we'll be able to recall at least an additional teacher. So I just want to congratulate them.
Okay, thank you. So is there a motion to approve?
Madam Chair, I make a motion to affirm the recommendation of the superintendent to recall Stacy DeMello, regular 1.0, grade 4 science teacher at Washington Oak Elementary School for the 2020-2021 school year, effective August 13, 2020.
I second the motion.
Are there any other questions from the committee? Seeing none, all in favor? Oh,
Aye.
No, I'm sorry. Can we have a roll call vote, please?
Kathy Patnode,
Yes.
Dave Florio,
Yes.
Luke Murray,
Yes.
Donna Colonian,
Yes.
James Pearson.
Yes.
Thank you. Moving on to agenda item number 8, distance learning policy. It's our first reading, our reference number 3. I'm sure you had a chance to look at it. Mr. Levis, did you want to begin the conversation?
I just want to thank Mr. Pearson, obviously Dr. Dixon, and Mr. Cowart. Spent a lot of time on this policy. Mr. Cowart spent time working with many of our administrators, teacher leaders. And we recognize from, distance learning, finding out on March 13th and, the next week being our vacation week, but how hard our community, our teachers worked on preparing and reflecting from that, both from, just conversations and also surveys. We thought that we needed to really give some more guidance around what distance learning will be for Coventry Public Schools. So this is what this policy does. It sets some of those parameters. So that's, I don't know if Mr. Pearson you want to add or Mr. Cowart, but I just want to thank them. There's a lot of work that went into this.
I will echo your thanks to Mr. Cowart. He did all the heavy, well, not all the heavy, but the majority of the heavy lifting on this policy. And I don't think we would have been able to move as quickly as we did without his effort. So thank you, Don.
And to kind of add to all of that, when we worked in our task force groups, I had the curriculum task force, and I actually shared the draft of the policy with that group because it crossed all subgroups of our district, parents, teachers, administrators, and a lot of the final product came from feedback from the folks on that task force group. And of course, Ms. Aronakis weighed in as well to give us some feedback. So what we have put together is really, I think, a collaborative effort, and I think it's needed. When we went through distance learning, we had feedback from parents along the way and teachers and administrators. We could see some things that we really liked and some things we needed to tighten up, and having a policy which lays out some guidelines with expectations and some accountability pieces, I think is going to put everybody on the same page. And when we did the end of the year survey with the teachers and the parents, both surveys came out with results that really pointed to the fact that we needed something to sort of formalize what distance learning looks like in our district. So that's how we ended up where we're at.
Great, thank you, Mr. Cowart. Mr. Florio, did you have any questions before we move to motion?
No, Madam Chair, I just want to thank the committee, and I'd like to thank Mr. Pearson and Dr. Dixon and Don and everyone who worked on the distance learning policy. This was a learning experience for everyone, and especially them. I have to commend them for doing a great job. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Florio. Mr. Murray?
I don't have any comments at this time. Thank you.
Mrs. Colonian?
I just want to echo what Mr. Florio said. Nice job, James. You always do a great job with the policy. I just think this is great. Thank you.
And finally, Mr. Pearson, any final last words before we motion?
No, nothing more to add.
Okay, thank you. So is there a motion? Actually, this is just dispense with the first reading of the policy. And I just want to remind the public that they probably don't have any questions because they haven't seen it yet. So it will in fact be posted on our website, I assume, so that the public will be able to take a look at it. And then when we actually approve the policy next time at our next meeting, you'll have a chance to actually ask any questions at that time. That being said, is there a motion to dispense with the first reading of this policy?
Madam Chair, I make a motion to dispense with the first reading of the distance learning policy.
I second the motion.
Could we have a roll call vote, please?
Yeah, before I do that, I just want to say it already is on the website so people can look at it already under the district information.
Wonderful. Thank you, Mrs. McDonald.
All right, Kathy Patnode,
Yes.
Dave Florio,
Yes.
Luke Murray,
Yes.
Donna Colunian,
Yes.
James Pearson.
Yes.
Thank you very much. Motion carries 5-0. Moving on to we're tabling number 9, which is Title 9 policy.
Yeah, we need to vote
So
on
we're
that, Madam
moving
Chair.
on to 10.
Ms. Patno, I think we need to vote on the table.
Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't know that we always, sometimes we
I
table.
believe we were supposed to vote. Mr. Anderson happens to be here, so I just want to, but we should be
Are you
voting the
doing
table.
properly?
Technically, you should vote to table, but obviously nobody's objecting to it being tabled, so I defer to the chair.
Well, let's do it the way that it's been suggested by our superintendent. So is there a motion to table item number 9, which is Title 9 policy?
Madam Chair, I make a motion to table the Title IX policy.
I second the motion.
Roll call vote, please.
Kathy Patnode,
Yes.
Dave Florio,
Yes.
Luke Murray,
Yes.
Donna Colunian,
Yes.
James Pearson.
Yes.
Thank you so much. Motion officially carries 5-0 to table this agenda item. Moving on to 10, which is the discussion and vote on the temporary reorganization of administrative responsibilities. Mr. Levis, can you start this conversation?
Sure. With the appointment of Mr. Coward to the assistant superintendent, there was an opportunity for us to, as an administrative staff, to talk about looking at the position of the Director of Curriculum Instruction and Assessment. I think there was consensus that Don has done a phenomenal job working with teacher leaders and our administrators around moving curriculum. We wanted to keep that, but in order to do that, we needed to kind of reorganize. So we looked at this as an opportunity to take some of these different responsibilities and look at our administrative team. And we felt that we could go for a year to see how we, and again, it's not, we believe that we can do this effectively, but to take on different responsibilities. And those individuals are, we had Ms. Maycumber as a facilitator, a leader of the secondary principals, Ms. Anzalone as a facilitator, leader for the elementary principals. Mr. Wilson, our Director of Special Ed, was going to support the Title IX, which is brand new regulations that we're actually working on the policy. We'll be bringing that forward, I believe, next school committee meeting. and he'll be the coordinator for that. And Mr. Sharkart, Dr. Sharkart, our assistant special ed director, is going to take on Title I. And then it also includes me working closely with the secondary schools, middle school, high school, and also with the support of Donna working on like homeschool and student teaching and the homeless liaison. And, you know, we believe that we can do this successfully. We know right now we're all caught up in terms of COVID-19 planning, and we'll be talking a lot about that. And it's very taxing, but I think to get back to some type of normalcy will be good for everybody, whatever that looks like, you know, starting the school year. We believe this is realistic. And so we presented that, talked about this in executive session, and, you know, asked the committee to consider it for a year. It'll allow us to save an administrative position and also have significant savings in terms of the salary and benefit portion. But for a year, to be realistic, there, you know, the questions about capacity, we don't want to take on too much. But I think it's hard to assess what people are doing now, because all of us, this is a 24/7 component, and recognize that. But moving forward, a lot of us, this aligns with a lot of, I spent a lot of time in the middle school and the high school, and Dr. Sharkart spends a lot of time working in the Title I schools, and Brad works with all the schools and all the administrators, and you know, Amy and Brooke, it's a natural extension for them in terms of these meetings that they'll be working with, supporting their colleagues. So we felt that it's appropriate to present this to the school committee. Again, it's something that would need to be approved from the school committee because it's hasn't been approved before in terms of the positions. These would be amendments to individuals' contracts.
Okay,
For
thank
1
you,
year.
Mr. Love. Thanks, Mr. Levis. I'm going to start with Mr. Florio. Do you have any questions or comments for the superintendent?
No questions, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Moving on to Mr. Murray. Do you have any questions or comments you'd like to make?
No additional questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Mrs. Kalunian?
I do not have any.
Okay, thank you. And finally, Mr. Pearson, any questions?
Yeah, well, a statement, in addition to, you know, the contractual changes that will be needed to change these roles if this motion passes. Also keep in mind, you know, we'll need an updated organizational chart, even though it's temporary for 1 year. We still need to have visibility and public visibility to what the administrative organization looks like with roles and responsibilities. Thank you.
Thank you. That's an excellent point, Mr. Pearson. I don't have any questions at this time either. So are we ready to make a motion?
Madam Chair, I make a motion to approve the temporary reorganization of administration responsibilities.
I second the motion.
And before we, I call for the vote, are there any people out in the attendees that have any questions or comments that they'd like to make?
We have no hands raised.
Thank you, Mr. Murphy. All right, could we have a roll call vote, please?
Kathy Patnode,
Yes.
Dave Florio,
Yes.
Luke Murray,
Yes.
Donna Kalunian,
Yes.
James Pearson,
No.
Motion carries 4 with 1 negative. And I just want to wish that everyone takes the new responsibilities on and can be able to do this with not too much extra effort. Even though I know we're asking a lot of the people involved. That being said,
Madam Chair, can I just ask one thing while we're on this?
Oh, sure. Yeah.
Okay, just one thing. Mr. Levis, you mentioned that offering up a status report in a couple months. Can we put that on the agenda item for a couple months out, just so we can assess, get a report back? on how this is going?
Oh, definitely. Yeah, I think yes.
Thank you.
Thank you for bringing that up, Mr. Murray. Very good point. Moving on to 11, which is the necessity of school construction update. It was our reference number 4. I don't know who was going to start this. Maybe Mr. Levis, and then you're going to hand it over to Mr. Murray.
No, I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Murray,
Okay.
Just give me
if you don't
1
mind,
minute.
Mr. Murray.
You're on.
No, no problem. I'm going to do a screen share. And can everybody see that presentation? Are you seeing that? What's everyone seeing right now?
Coventry Public Schools, necessity of school construction update, August 13, 2020.
Thank you, Dave. All right. So I'm just going to give a brief presentation on this because a lot's happened in a short amount of time. And I want to make sure everyone on the school committee is up to date. Likewise, we're going to keep council in the loop on this as we move forward. Because of COVID, things have slowed down a little bit. So we're trying to keep this going. So just to remind everyone, we have the letter of intent submitted to RIDE. The RIDE stage 1 was submitted and it has been approved as of April by RIDE. So that's a positive. We're able to move forward to a stage 2 type document. So just to remind everyone, stage 1 was an assessment of the needs within the district, basically identifying the deficiencies and where we have to address things. RIDE has seen fit to agree with that, or at least go through our report and agree with that. So now we're into stage 2 of the necessity of school construction, which identifies, or we're supposed to identify solutions to this, the issues that were identified. So we've begun actively working on the stage 2. We rekindled our effort a few weeks ago. There was a push because we know this date is coming. We reached out to RIDE. We confirmed that the new due date, or the due date that we can go for, which is the second due date, is February 15th of 2021. We were not going to make the September deadline. So we think February is doable. We're working toward that, but it's going to take a lot of effort in the next couple months to make that happen. If all goes well and we receive necessary votes to submit to RIDE, we anticipate in May 2021 that we would be approved by RIDE if all goes well, and then we'd have the ability for council to vote on the project to potentially go out to bond and fund that. We've taken the position as a building committee that we need to be laser focused on this effort. I know there's political challenges ahead, there's funding challenges ahead, we're dealing a lot with COVID, but if not now, then when is sort of the mantra. You know, if we would have done this in 2008 when the economy collapsed, we would have been much better positioned at 2013 and 14 come along. We could have taken advantage of all the money that was available. So we need to keep these efforts rolling despite all of the activity around us. So the committee is charged with assessing the needs and developing a project scope. And we need to balance that scope with the fiscal limitations of the town. And so one of the things that the architect has really stressed is we need to talk to the other side of the street, so to speak, and really nail down what the fiscal constraints are of the town. You know, just logistically, not you know, political appetite, any of that, just the real limitations. So we're currently actively working to develop a scope of work, so to kind of hone down what our projects, what our needs are, and develop a project on that. Lay out a timeline, and I'll share a schedule in a minute on that. And keeping in mind that stage 2 is really directed at a 5-year effort. It's not a 20-year lookout. This is what do we want to do over the next couple of years that's a real project, boots on the ground, that we can get done. We know we have needs that are probably going to span over the next 20 to 25 years, just due to fiscal considerations. We can't do everything at once. We know that, but we have to take a small chunk and work on that. I mentioned the fiscal constraints, and we are working on that. Convey information. This is a key aspect, making sure the public, the council, everybody is constantly hearing about this effort, understanding what it is, disseminating that information as it comes in and answer questions. And we've committed to doing that, and we have a plan for that. And then ensure projects are in harmony with the guiding principles. And what are those principles? We went through these. These were some questions as the stage 1 developed on what would guide our efforts. And this was recommended by the architect of prioritizing these. Warm, safe, and inviting, just the basics. Having a school that you can actually teach in. Future ready, so 21st century learning environments. Reflecting community values and really trying to bring in the total community as these schools are spaces for the entire community. Equitable access, so obviously we're equitable throughout the district. Small school feel, large school pride. So how do we look at potential, whether it be we look at consolidation or we look at building expansions or everything is on the table. But we want to make sure we continue to have this small community feel. School as a community resource, which a lot of our schools already serve that role, and it's sustainable. We have to really think about, right now, a lot of our schools aren't sustainable. We're spending a lot operationally on energy and maintenance on buildings and constantly chasing the tail on this. So how do we make these schools more sustainable from a variety of aspects? So this was the school rankings. I won't dwell on this. But one thing that was noted by the architect is the middle school was the only one to prioritize warm, safe, and inviting second and future ready first. And I think that's kind of a reflection of the grade levels where parents are transitioning from that elementary level. Really their expectations go up in the secondaries where they're transferring to the Chromebooks right now. They're looking for these, what they see maybe in other districts, these future-ready schools that adapt to 21st century learning, as opposed to the old school teacher in front of the child model. So this was called out and kind of part of our last discussion at our last meeting. So our actions to date, just to update you on where we're at, we met on July 23rd, a very brief meeting to kick back off. We had a 2-hour work session on the 1st, was a Saturday. Alita Hall, who's my co-chair, has been great. She's developed a Gantt chart schedule for the entire process. We worked on that together. She mapped it out. She's a construction manager for Gilbane. So she's an invaluable resource for us that I'm going to be, delegating some responsibilities to as we move forward. But we have laid out this schedule through February. Working with the administration to identify the funds for the procurement of architect, consultants, and owner's project manager. So I have had constant communications with Sarah on funding for these efforts. We're looking to use impact funds to do this. We had discussion as late as today about utilizing that because this would go towards a capital project. It is required by RIDE that we have these consultants on board. So just so everyone understands, there's the architect who will lead the process. We have sub-consultants to that architect, such as geotechnical engineers, structural engineers. They have to do assessments in every school. So RIDE makes sure that as we move forward, we don't miss something in a school. We don't prioritize something in one school and then we miss that the roof falls in at Blackrock because we didn't do a structural assessment. So that is required under the stage 2. In addition, there is a requirement for an owner's project manager who oversees the project, kind of guides the committee. It's supposed to be over the architect and kind of driving, helping us stay within bounds on the project and make sure we kind of shuffle it through the stage 2. That is also a RIDE requirement. It is not a big ticket item, but it is required. So we had a meeting with town officials on Friday the 7th with the manager and the finance director. We had a very good, productive discussion. They are going back and working with their bond counsel to look at the fiscal capacity of the town. And that will help us kind of guide our scope moving forward. I have not received any correspondence back yet, but I do expect it soon. We've met with the architects so far on a couple occasions. They've been very good about extending some services pro bono for now without a contract in the interest of keeping this process moving. So they've been very useful in helping guide our effort in stage 2, which they have extensive experience on. And then we did have that workshop, which I talked about, and a lot of the focus in just being upfront, it kind of came down to the middle school. There's a lot of concern about air quality, and I believe the superintendent's going to talk about that tonight, but about the air quality in the school, the layout, just the sheer management, the size of the building. There was a number of issues stated in stage 1 that concerned us. And so we kind of went through a loose roll call. I don't want to say a vote, but just sort of opinions of the school committee, the building committee. And the general consensus was, let's focus our efforts on the middle school as part of maybe just one bigger project, something tangible, something the community could be proud of, and that we can kind of model forward. Because there is where we lose kids to other districts. There is where parents have the most anxiety of bridging that gap from the elementary to the middle school level. So they felt it prudent that, maybe we start focusing, coalescing our efforts around that, while also looking at priority 1 needs and NEAS priorities at the high school. And Ms. Dixon, Dr. Dixon was an advocate for this, which was really try to look at the high school and make sure that the priority 1 elements, we all know HVAC, which some of that's going to get addressed with some of the capital monies we have, but some of the larger things under NEAS that were identified to make sure we're checking those boxes. And then the elementary school, those, the question with the elementary schools is once you touch one, you end up having to touch multiples because of equity. So we can't rebuild Black Rock and not look at Tioga. And so it's a spider effect there. I think what we're looking at it now is keeping them look beyond that 5-year. What do they need to continue on? And this is going to get refined. We're going to refine this scope as we go forward. This is the update as I have it today. We might come back in a month with a more refined scope that reflects a little bit different values. We do have a project schedule. It is in your packet. I will not dwell on it because it's quite extensive, but I want to make sure I highlight a couple things on this. You can't see it well, but you can see it. There's red town council updates on here. Every month, we've committed to giving an update to town council. So that means our first update is this Monday. I've sent a formal request to the town manager and the council to be put on the agenda once a month. We want to make sure they're kept in the loop. We do not want to drop the stage 2 report on them. We are aware that there's a new council, potentially some new council members coming in November. We know there will be at least a couple coming in November. And we want to make sure they're brought up to date rather quickly and they feel comfortable with this whole process, because there will be a vote that's necessary to approve the stage 2 and get it to RIDE. And so once a month, and then in December, we're going to be providing a 50% update report, 75% update report prior to Christmas. Then just after Christmas break, we will have a 75%. They'll have time to review it. They'll also have a joint building committee, town council meeting. And then the school committee will also have ample opportunity. I will be communicating out at once a month at our meetings on the necessity of school construction. It won't be this long, I promise. But the goal here is to constantly be out there communicating with our elected officials, and then at the same time, we're working on a communication outreach effort to the community to make sure everyone's aware. The numbers that may come out of this may be scary, let's be honest, but we want to convey the need. The need is there, and the problem isn't going away. It's probably going to just cost us more later if we kick the can down the road. And that's sort of what we're communicating. The why now is we get RIDE reimbursements. We have a lot of opportunity now to reclaim some of that money. So we want to make sure that we're clear in that communication as we deal with the project and being out in the community. So I think this is the last slide. So the next 4 weeks, we're going to finalize procurement of the architect and their sub-consultants and the OPM, hopefully. We're working diligently on that. Hopefully get back with the town to determine the fiscal capacity on the potential for bonding. Conduct 3 community workshops. So that's what's on our schedule over the next month. We have a long range planning session coming up this Saturday, which is an hour-and-a-half session. We have a communications and outreach session. And then we have what I'm calling a core project and advanced visioning. That is sort of what we've already identified. If we're going to be looking at the middle school, how, the architect's going to start guiding us on what that looks like. I took a tour today of the middle school with my co-chair and the architect. We went through the entire school. I do want to give a shout out. Mr. Lucian specifically pointed out that his custodial staff has been outstanding. And I can concur with that. Looking at the building, what I saw last summer, even compared to this summer, just the repainting that's been done and the amount of effort they're putting in, replacing floors and doing things, I did want to give them a shout out because I thought they were doing a phenomenal job over the summer. A lot of people think that the custodial staff disappears over the summer, and they don't. They're in there working every day. So I did want to recognize them. And then we'll be providing these regular updates to the council. Like I said, the first one's on the 17th, and the last is on the 14th. So with that, I'll stop talking and ask if anybody has any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Murray. Mr. Florio, before we take it out to the public, I'm just going to go down our list of school committee members. So, Mr. Florio, do you have anything?
Yes, I have to give Luke a lot of credit because as a member of the former school building committee from 2000, he has done an outstanding job working with the architect, working with the construction company, keeping everybody informed. He did a great job. He's doing a great job, and I congratulate him. And I think we're going to have. You're optimistic, Luke, and I like that about you. You know, despite everything that's going on right now with COVID and everything else, you have that laser focus on the school construction project, which we need desperately. And as a fellow school committee person, I congratulate you. Thank you very much for everything you've done. Thank you. I know it's hard with everything that you have and everything that's going on and your kids, and I know you love boating and I know you love being outdoors, and this makes it real tough, because you're a family man. And thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Florio. Mrs. Colonian?
No, I just gotta say thank you for, keeping it moving and, not putting it on the back burner with everything else going on. You're doing a good job, and just keep up the good work. Thank you. Thanks for the update. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Mrs. Colonian. And finally, Mr. Pearson?
Just gonna echo what's already been said. Thank you for the update. It's good to see that we have a pretty solid project timeline for getting this report out, and hopefully getting that stage 2 application submitted and improved at some point. So thank you for the update. Looking forward to hearing this as it progresses, hearing more about this.
Thank you, Mr. Pearson. And again, my thanks as well to our chair of the building committee. And you're doing an excellent job. Really appreciate the work of you and the other committee members. And I think that's it for me, seeing that I'm also on the committee. This was sort of just a brush up because I've seen this last time we met. So, but I'm really glad that you put this on, you put this as part of the update to the rest of the committee. It's been very, very helpful, and also to the community as well. That being said, it looks like we have one hand up, Mr. Murphy.
Yep. Okay. Kerry, you are up. Can you just state your name for the record?
Hey, Kerry, you're on mute.
Hi, sorry about that. Carrie Landry, I'm a teacher at the middle school. I just have a couple questions. I've been teaching there for about 20 years. It'll be my 20th year this upcoming school year. And recently, I know like with all the COVID stuff and return to school, there's been a lot of talk about air quality. And I know that that's going to be an agenda item, but I wanted to talk about the building committee in particular because, forgive my ignorance, I didn't realize that it was open to the public, if you will. I didn't know if you had teachers that were a part of the building committee. I was wondering if, that was a consideration. Like I said, I've been teaching in that building for 20 years, so I know quite a bit about it as far as like somebody that's there day in and day out. Mold is definitely an issue that I'm so concerned about. I've gotten sick. I can't speak for my colleagues, but I know that I've been sick through the years and I've had some things happen, and there is black mold in the building that's toxic. I did write to Mr. Pearson. He's my school committee rep, just to, kind of encourage funds maybe to be given towards the middle school to kind of fix that, and looking at the budget. And I also encourage like people in the community to reject the budget last go around because I do feel very passionately about this. So my first question was, is it a building committee something that teachers can join, or is there a way for us to give input to you so that you guys, can hear from us? And then the second question is, in order for this to move to the next stage, I would imagine you need a lot of community support. And is there a way that, are you guys thinking about a way to put this on people's radars? Like, is there a way I can help? Is there a way other teachers that can help, or other people in the community?
Yeah, so good questions. So the building committee itself is there's certain positions that are mandated by RIDE, and that the makeup is we have to have any building committee per the charter has to have 2 council members. There was a discussion that was had on how we blend what the town charter says and then what RIDE requirements were, and we did come to the middle on that. So just so you know, Principal Lucian is on our committee, as well as Mrs. Anzalone, Ms. Mangiarelli, Ms. Patnode, the superintendent. We have 5 community members, correct me if I'm wrong, Craig. Don Cowart's there. So Mr. Lucian obviously is very familiar with the school. I met with him today when we walked the school. I've walked the school a few times now. I am aware of the ventilation issues. It's been brought up a number of times. We know that when the ransomware attack happened, that it created chaos because, obviously we had to have the entire building cleaned. It's not what we want. Obviously, I'll leave it to the superintendent to address any short-term needs because I'm sure he's going to address some of this in his presentation. From a building committee standpoint, what I can tell you is we know about it. We're focused on it. We're looking to address it. And not just in a Band-Aid, let's, slap a patch on it way. We've been very clear with the architect that we're tired of putting Band-Aids on things and really looking at an effort that is not a complete reconstruction, because there's some things in that middle school that do have value, such as the auditorium, some of the big spaces that RIDE won't reimburse us on. But we are dedicated to not just, just trying to patch a little bit of an area in that school and call it okay. So that's a long-term effort. And like I said, I'll let the superintendent address a little bit of the air quality on the short term.
Well, before you do that, I have another question though, too. Sure. Now, when we decide what is going to happen to the middle school as far as the work, do you guys get competing bids, or do you just go with the people that are volunteering on this committee?
You're saying for the construction?
Yeah, for the construction aspect of it and other things. Is there a process where companies can submit bids? Yes. Obviously.
So we have
our money and that kind of thing.
Sure. No, that's a good question. So we have a couple hurdles until we get to that point. We're in the planning stages now. And if a project materializes, we set the budgets and we kind of submit the RIDE. And the whole reason for this process is we wouldn't care as much, but RIDE is offering to pay a large part of that bill. So right now we get a 44% reimbursement. It could go up from there. So if RIDE approves our plan, they will tell us. What's that?
Is there a deadline for that 44%? Is the I know that you said something about February 15th, 2021 is the target date, I think, to get the plans in to RIDE. Is that what you were saying? And then it should be approved by May?
So that February date is set by right as part of their necessity of school construction, because there's two things. There's housing aid, which we get a 44% reimbursement on. That has been ongoing. That has been consistent from the state over the past, I don't know, Sarah, you can chime in here. I don't want to say for at least for the past decade, it's been consistent. What hasn't been consistent is, if you remember a couple of years ago, there was a bond passed, $250 million bond vote by the voters. Those were what I call, lack of better term, kickers. So if you do address certain things in the schools, you get those kickers. So you could feasibly up your reimbursement to 60%. In addition to that, there's some additional things that they'll provide, such as pay go. They can pay things in advance where it's not just reimbursement. They help us financially with cash flow. I won't go too far down that road. But to the point, to back up to your previous question as far as bidding, if we get through this process, RIDE approves the plan, we decide to go to bond, and if the voters decide to allow us to proceed with the finances of this, then we would go out to bid. The architect would draft construction level drawings, which that would feasibly happen in stage 3, and then would put this out to bid. Everything under state law, push down to municipal, everything has to go out to bid. So especially this type of project. And in addition, this project requires an owner's project manager the entire construction. So we would also hire a third-party individual to help us manage that effort. So the school committee, the building committee's role in this is really advisory, to kind of pull in community comments and kind of interject, just basically guide the process and make sure it continues to move forward. But we're going to be relying on a lot of experts as we move forward, the architects, the OPMs, contractors, to work on the design plans and implementation.
Does any part of this go up to, like, forgive my ignorance again, but I don't know, if other people might have the same question. I'm not well versed in this, but does this have to go to the taxpayers for a vote to be approved for the bond?
It would. It would. And this goes to your earlier question. I'll loop this into your earlier question.
Okay.
Communication and outreach, right? Though that's why it's important throughout this that we're communicating with the public on why this effort's important, why now, and we're constantly outreach. To the point of your question, yes, we've already talked about communication and outreach. I'm not calling it marketing because we're not marketing anything. We're relying on the public to make their own determinations on this based on good, valid information. So we feel as a committee, if we disseminate quality information to the community, explain why there's a need, explain the why now, that the community will see fit to approve, if it moves forward, a bond. And that would probably be, sometime maybe late next year. Again, this is all relying on a number of process steps that need to happen. But respectively, anything that would move forward requiring funding from the town would have to go to a bond vote, because any general obligation has to go to a vote.
And lastly, are there any town council members that are attending our school committee meeting this evening?
So I will tell you that Dr. Dixon is on our building committee. There is supposed to be another designated member. Unfortunately, we haven't, got another member active in the committee yet, but we're hoping to. I don't know about tonight. There's a long list of attendees.
Yeah.
But I can tell you that we are, again, we've taken the stance that whether or not they're actively involved on our side, that we're going to be proactively pushing out information to the council to make sure that they're aware of the process and there are no surprises.
I guess the reason why I wanted to speak is because I have to let you know that, as a teacher in the school district, I am very passionate about this issue, and I know my colleagues are too. Some of them, the ones that I've talked to anyway, I can't speak for everybody. And I think that I can definitely say that I'm just looking for a way to be more active in helping. So that's all. And I didn't know, it was a recommendation that was given to me to join the building committee. I didn't know how to do that, so I thought I'd ask.
So,
and I'm not an expert by any means. My husband does CAC work, but other than that, I'm limited. I don't do any building of any sort. I can just tell you what my experience has been in the schools.
So our committee right now is pretty robust. We have a good what we feel is a good representation. However, I would never preclude somebody who wants to be involved in the process from not voicing. So you're welcome to reach out to me. My email address is on the school website.
Okay.
Reach out to me via email. I'll make sure that you stay involved. Also, you mentioned Mr. Pearson as your school committee member. He's going to be intimately involved, whether he's at these building committee meetings or not. He's going to be informed so he can answer questions you have. So use those channels to your advantage. And if you have any ideas, definitely reach out, put your ideas down. We'll take them and I'll bring them up at the building committee meetings. And that goes for anybody listening. This is a collaborative community process. This is not to shut anybody out.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
No problem. Is that all the questions we have?
That looks like it's it.
Okay. Thank you so much, Mr. Murphy. Thank you, Mr. Murray. It looks like we've got an interested crowd out there. So if we could move on to number 12, which is the FY21 budget discussion. Mr. Levis, did you want to start us on this discussion?
I'll start and then I'll defer to Ms. Mangiarelli. As you know, there's not been a local budget, so we're working on, it was rejected. I'm not sure when the council, I don't know if the committee has any inside information, but it doesn't look like the council has a meeting until the 24th. So we will most likely be going through, right now we have 1/12 of last year's appropriation, which doesn't mean we have all of last year's appropriation. We received 1/12 from the town that we can access in terms of, which has a great impact on our cash flow. We also are working with the state in terms of they have reduced our state aid to 91% for July and August. And Sarah will talk about probably, but she was on a call today where it was indicated that there probably won't be a state budget until mid-September, sometime in September at the earliest. And my, hunch is that the state will probably continue to give us only 91%. I think Sarah had said if that continues throughout the year, that's a $2.4 million, I think, reduction. So we're in very difficult situation. We'll be talking a little bit later about our COVID, what we need for COVID-19, that we're struggling just purchasing materials that we need to purchase. And I don't see this changing. So anything we can do to save money, we're trying to do. But in the same regards, we need to prepare for, at some point, re-entering our school. So, Mr. Murphy, I don't know if you can bring up the first list of cuts that we had, and then I'll turn it over to Ms. Mangiarelli. But I just want to go back to a list of cuts we had talked about and proposed when we talked about a level funding budget. I know there were different comments made about these cuts and maybe looking at other situations. This is our reality. And again, I know Sarah has been working. I talked to Mr. Arnett today, trying to figure out where we're going with the budget. So I'm coming to you saying that more likely than not, depending on how long we go, that these are cuts that we're going to have to seriously look at, and we'll be asking the committee to make a decision on. Like I said earlier, we made I think we're making a tough decision as an administration team to kind of be supportive, work together, and proposed for at least a year saving about $128,000. So these are cuts that we have presented before publicly, and we have incredible cash flow problems right now. And Sarah may have some more information about that, but we struggle making payroll. There's been suggestions that we just deficit spend, and I use the analogy. You can't. It's a corny analogy, but I think it makes sense that you go to McDonald's, and if you don't get past window number 1, you're not going to get anything at window number 2. And we're at that point where we are struggling. We don't have money based on the local situation and the state situation. So these are the cuts that we're going to propose and probably at our next school committee meeting, because we can't continue to go into the fall, and operate without a budget with a 1/12 and a reduction of state aid. So again, I think that, these had been presented to the school committee before. They include athletics, they include clubs, they include supplies. And again, remember, we're supposed to be we are planning to go back into school, and we'll be presenting a budget that we would, later on, that we're going to ask the committee to approve, assuming we have funds to pay for it, that'll allow us to get into. Anyways, I'll turn it over to Sarah now, but I just want to reiterate the importance of where we're at and the stress. Again, we know moving forward that we need significant federal stimulus money to support us moving forward. But we need to come back and visit this, because we're basically operating on an even less than a level funded budget, because we only have access to the 1/12 of that each month. So Sarah, do you mind picking up now?
No, and actually, Jim, if you can bring up the other 5 reference, the one that says FY21, yeah, thank you. So we are at 2/12 now because we're into August. So we are trying to slow our expenditures as much as possible. Unfortunately, in the summer is when we have to do a lot of annual renewals for property and liability insurance, workers' comp, all of our annual software agreements. So it's a catch-22. They say spend only 1/12 of your expenditures or 2/12 of your expenditures, but a lot of these have to be paid in full at the start of the school year. We are monitoring cash flow on a weekly basis. As part of the new software, the school took over their checking account. Previously, that was handled by the town. So cash flow was not as much of a concern for the school because the town has excess cash that the school does not have. So I have to monitor it on a weekly basis. We've had to hold our accounts payable check run checks twice before we could release them to wait for cash to come in. And again, that's with very small expenses going out right now. One of the biggest concerns is that we would need to expend quite a bit of cash to get ready for COVID in advance. Any of the grant money is reimbursable on a quarterly basis, so we would not even be able to put in for reimbursement for that until September 30th. And again, the $747,000 application has not even been released yet. I thought actually I sent in the application because I received a file from RIDE, and they basically said that that's just kind of the template that we're using. So we'll pull that up later. But so that formal application has not even been released for us to use yet. Also the use of fund balance, that budget, oh, it says budget deficit, it should say budget surplus from FY20. We have not closed out our books and we have not completed the audit. So I really can't even start expending those funds, nor will those funds be transferred to the school account until we can close that out and reconcile it, which is typically November, December. The audit's due in December. We're receiving 91% of our state aid for July, August. We should expect that for September. Right now, we're paying FY20 salaries. So we pay all of our teachers and year-round staff over 26 equal pays, even over the summer. So the FY21 salary costs don't kick in until the September 4th check run. So we will see an increase in our expenses then when we start paying off of the FY21 salaries. I did meet with John Arnett again today. So we are working on cash flow. I've said I needed that cash. They have transferred it over, but it's some timing on their side as well for liquidating cash to be able to transfer over. However, even when they transfer the amount due to us, it won't give us as much of a cushion as we will need in order to expend all of the funds necessary for the COVID response. So I'm concerned that we don't have a state budget, and that's not looking like we'll have one until September. It doesn't look like we'll have a town budget until September. We have needs that we need to purchase now, and we have a significant cash flow issue despite trying to hold the reins. So when Mr. Levis brought up some of the cuts on that list may need to happen, some of those include activities that would begin assuming that we return to school come September. But since we're operating on a level funded budget, it will be very hard for us to move forward with those activities without a different FY21 budget that we're facing. So that's pretty much all I have. I think the COVID budget's on a separate agenda item. So that's really all I have for the FY21, but I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Sarah. Thank you, Mr. Levis. I guess we can start with Mr. Florio. Do you have any questions about the presentation that we've just listened to?
Yes, I do, Madam Chair. I can't believe the town and the state and the federal government abandoned our school system. I guess they've done it with many other school systems, Madam Chair. It just seems to hurt more when you hear the numbers and you see it in black and white. I mean, it's just incredible. We're running at month to month, and I don't know what we're going to do in terms of the COVID budget. It's just incredible that even though there was a vote and the people in town voted to give us more money, that it was just ignored. And makes me very sad, Madam Chair, that people just don't recognize the importance of education in Coventry. And I'm not saying, I'm saying the council, the current council, does not recognize the importance of education. And that includes Dr. Dixon and her conservative colleagues who decided we were just not worthy for whatever reason. And just makes me very sad, Madam Chair. Thank you. That's all I have to say.
Thank you, Mr. Florio. Mr. Murray?
Thank you. Sarah, I'm looking at the cuts list. We had talked about the wiring effort, and I remember there being a matching grant for that. Is that still in play?
Yes, and actually Mr. Murphy, not too long ago, just got the notice that the funds are ready when we are. So what that refers to is we are eligible for E-rate funding that will be expiring at the end of this year. It's a 50% match for some of the necessary upgrades that need to be made to our districts. I believe it was the 90s, the last time a lot of our wiring was done. So we had made some adjustments within the FY20 original budget to drop down some technology expenses associated with the one-to-one devices to make room to be able to cover that 50% match to take advantage of the funds available. So while a lot of these cuts will hurt significantly, these are projects that have been delayed far past they should have been, their timeline for being delayed. So it will be just disappointing if we have to let those 50% funds go. And Mr. Murphy can echo or add in anything that he wants to, because this is definitely more of his baby than mine.
Yeah, I think Sarah said it well. It's much less like your building project where these funds are available and we could essentially double up our dollars but we have to have the local appropriation to spend on it.
Right. And, I think that's extremely concerning to me. Anytime we can leverage funds and miss that opportunity, we tend not to get that opportunity back. We're going to be reliant on technology more and more. So it's more imperative than ever that we're investing in that. So there's certainly not a cut that I'd be in favor of. And I know, you know, none of these cuts, they're all, like, as you said, Sarah, they're all painful. I understand that. That said, we do know in the realities of COVID that some of these are a little bit softened because of the realities we're living in, right? You know, not telling anybody anything they don't know. Extracurricular clubs, athletics, a lot of these things are gonna have to be modified extremely or go away altogether to some extent in the short term. We don't know how long. I am concerned that if we do have availability to bring them back to climate changes, we won't have that opportunity. And it's not because making these cuts is not because we're against school sports or extracurricular activities. It's the reality we live in. So as far as the budget itself, the 91%, it was my understanding that the state was going to backfill that with CARES Act funding. Is that not the case? Are they just dropping us to 91%?
Oh, okay. So no. So what happened was what they backfilled state aid for FY20, which I should share. It got a little contentious today with me on the RIASBO meeting today when we had the Auditor General on the line.
Take the fifth, Sarah.
I am. I'm leaving it at that. But I think that what they did for FY20 was they cut our state education aid and then used CARES funds to backfill that money. We do have to share some of that with private schools. And then the rest, some of that we will actually have to use most likely to buy some COVID-related expenditures, such as we're looking at Chromebooks for the elementary grades sooner rather than later. And then we're going to transition in some expenditures that I deemed as a one-time expenditure, such as the potential transportation settlement. You know, we would shift some of those over to the COVID funds because I'm trying really hard not to add to a structural deficit by moving in reoccurring costs to those federal funds. The state aid at 91% for July and August is because the state doesn't have a budget. So in theory, when a budget is passed at the state level, if they can restore the state aid, then they would give us back that remaining percentages that they withheld in July and August and most likely September. I will say that the state is very careful about making any type of commitments that we would see 100% funding of the originally proposed FY20 state aid. So while they're all talking about how we need federal money and whatnot, they're very silent on what's going to happen on the state budget. So, you know, and I have said this pretty much all along, looking at the deficit that the state has, it doesn't make sense to me that there wouldn't be further reductions in state aid. I don't know where those funds are going to come from. So I think we should prepare ourselves for a further reduction in state aid, but the 91% is separate from the CARES Act money.
Okay, that helps clarify things for me because I wasn't aware that that wasn't getting prospectively backfilled at this time. So that's a real concern. I know we're not the only district dealing with this, and it's all over the news, and you know, just not, you know, people are talking about the reopenings, but I think what's not talked about enough is obviously just the financials of the situation. They want us to put kids in school. You're laying out that even to just cover our basic expense at this point, you know, it's talk out of your one side of your mouth. We want to open schools and get everyone in, but we're not going to fund it. And even in a normal situation, we'd be at a cash flow deficit here. This is a real problem. I know what you're, you know, for anyone who runs a business, this is what businesses go through on a regular basis, trying to, you know, you have certain peak times of your business and you have seasonality. This is a real problem because you know, we're not set up for this. You know, we had predictability to some extent in our cash flow. So I guess I'll probably have more questions offline for you just on the general budget. It is very concerning. I mean, the cuts in, you know, and this is important for the members, you know, the attendees, not having a budget from the town is a real problem. Compounding the state issues is we've created our own issues at a local level. We really have, and we kind of said this was going to happen, and now it's materializing. If we do not get a new budget passed, we're going to be at the 1/12 or 2/12, so we're going to continue on like this. So we need to get a new budget passed, regardless of what it is, and deal with the realities in front of us. So the cuts are what they are. I don't love making them, but I trust that you're watching out for us, and I appreciate your dialogue with the state and expressing our frustrations. So thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Murray. Mrs. Colonian?
I say the same as Luke, the cuts are what they are. Unfortunately, I'm hoping that if we have to cut these things, that we will be able to bring them back someday. But there's not much we can do. You're doing everything you can, Sarah. So just thanks for your hard work.
Thank you, Mrs. Clooney. And finally, Mr. Pearson.
Lots of curse words going through my head, but I won't say them publicly. Yeah, I mean, everyone's, again, I'm saying the word echo a lot, but I just want to echo everyone's sentiments. We've got some serious issues compounded at the local level because of the state issues and, of course, federal issues. I will remind everyone that per Title 16, since we're in a deficit spend after the budget failed, we're supposed to pass a plan to make sure our expenditures don't exceed our appropriations. We're supposed to do that within 30 days. I don't know if we're going to make that, but Mr. Levis mentioned the next school committee meeting, so that should be adequate. Because until we do that per Title 16, we don't have a valid school budget either, and that's something to be very conscious of. This problem doesn't go away by ignoring it, and I'm very comforted in the fact that no one's ignoring it. It's a horrible situation. I appreciate the work that's going into it to make sure we don't have a big problem, but I fear that we're in worse shape than the situation was in 2002 when the town took over the school finances. And I don't want to be put in that position, especially when it was precipitated by a failed budget vote at the all-day referendum and a failed the failure of the state to actually enact the state budget and give us the money that was promised to us. So it's a situation we're in that we didn't put ourselves in, but we find ourselves there anyway, and now have to, at the local level, at our level, school department level, need to dig out of until such a time that appropriations are finalized. And I'll also echo the statement that if we make cuts, which I believe, since there is no budget pending from the council for another all-day referendum, cuts will be made. I hope at some point many of those things that are cut will be able to be put back into play once funding normalizes. That's it. Nothing is said. Nothing good to say.
Thank you, Mr. Pearson. I really don't have anything to add. I just am grateful that, Sarah, you're at the helm of trying to figure this all out. I trust your accounting ability. I wouldn't even know where to start, quite honestly. Even with the cuts, I am very fearful of what's going to happen to our schools in the upcoming year. And I can only hope that the council will be faster than they appear to be moving, so that we don't continue in this really horrible state. It's bad enough that the state is kind of holding back funds to all municipalities, quite honestly. It's another thing that our own local government is doing the same, pretty much. And so I really don't know what to say, except that it's a hurt. And it's a hurt for everybody who's trying to do the best they can. And to have this sort of hammer over our heads as to how we're going to survive is difficult. it's difficult for morale. And so I just want all of our staff, teachers, faculty, students, parents to be aware that this causes morale issues and fear on every level. And so I don't know what else to say except that I try to remain hopeful, but I think we're in for a very rough time ahead, and we'll have to see how it all plays out. But thank you very much for your hard work and for putting it in black and white. Not much we can do except go ahead with the cuts.
Ms. Patno, can I just jump in just quickly? Mr. Murray had said something about how businesses deal with this all the time. And we know a lot of businesses, a lot of restaurants have gone out of business, right? They've closed shop because of this. But we can't. We have responsibility. We need to keep working. And, again, I want to echo what you had said about Ms. Mandrelli. She's been phenomenal. Like all of us, you make the best decisions on the information you have. And Sarah has worked tirelessly, as many people have, but to give us the best information. And I just want to say something about, we'll talk about in the next agenda item, COVID-19, I believe, the budget, but it ties into FY21 budget, is that I believe the funding piece has been downplayed. And we've been saying all along publicly, I know you and I had a conversation about, we've been reaching out to the governor, and today we had a conversation with the commissioner. They were talking about problems. I mean, my first response was just funding is a major barrier. And we can't minimize that, Our FY21 budget's about, we always talk about keeping that laser beam focused on students. And we're still doing that, but want to be clear that it impacts, we'll talk about our next budget, but it impacts what direction we go on. You're going to see when we talk about air quality, how availability of supplies and budget will impact the moves that we can make, which is going to dictate how we open. And, the governor's taking a stand and pointing, fingers. This is just my opinion. But I think it's important. We've downplayed the fact that that $42 million original dollars that we were supposed to get late March, early April, that just backfilled. They supplanted with state aid, and that was kind of brushed under. We still don't have that. We're running pretty much a deficit. That money will be allocated in again, Sarah's the expert, but in FY21, we still don't have access to that 50 million that was talked about a month ago. So, everybody said we're in tough situation just to make regular payroll, and yet the expectation is, and we're continuing to plan. The morale. I think our teachers have been phenomenal. Our staff, our families have been extremely patient. Our administrators are working tirelessly. We've kept that moving forward, but the reality is coming closer and closer that we need a significant amount of funds, and that our FY21 budget is going to have a great impact on what direction we go. And that's not an excuse. That's our reality. I was told that the end of this week, there should be announcements about a stimulus package. So we will see. I was on a call I was on today. But anyways, I just want to state that we are working hard as a community, and Mr. Pearson's exactly right in terms of our responsibility, what we need to do. And I hope the committee feels that, we're being as current and upfront as we can be about our financial situation. I'm disappointed that the council is only meeting on the 24th to talk about it. We're this is a perfect storm. We're at that fork in the road. So, we're still planning though. We're still moving forward. We're not just spinning our wheels. But I just wanted to talk about the governor and the state aid and federal money, and it's important to know what's really transpired with all that. So thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Levis. Before we move on, I would like to ask if there are any people in the public that have their hands raised. I see one. Mr. Murphy?
Okay, Kim, just please state your name for the record.
Hi, this is Kimberly Shockley. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Yes.
I just want to understand, I have a clear understanding, because people have been saying, who cares that we cut sports from the budget because we're not going to have this sports this year anyway. But as I understand it, once we cut it from the budget next year, even if we increase by 4%, it won't be to put sports back. or any of these other extracurricular activities or anything else we're taking from. It will just be to keep up with our current budget. Am I wrong about that, or do I have the wrong understanding?
No, so I think the concern is that we put forward all along a budget pre-COVID that we needed to cover our operations as they existed. So I think you're right in saying that this may be or it may be a convenient year. I don't even want to say a good year. It may be a convenient year to cut the sports and some of the extracurricular clubs that we may not be able to run regardless. However, those expenditures, once they come out of our budget, and it's not even actually on the expense side, it's the fact that we're lowering our maintenance of effort requirement from the town. So we're level funding our local appropriation, which means we can never increase that number more than 4% within, from year to year. So by cutting out $1.8 million from that local appropriation, we can't ever get that additional 4% on that 1.8 million. So we're cutting down our ability to add expenditures back because we're tying our hands, so to speak, on how much we can increase the appropriation. Did you follow that?
I think so. So I think I did understand it correctly. And so, like I said, if we cut it this year, next year when the budget comes back up again, even if we increase, things don't go back.
Correct.
Okay.
What things won't go back, that's, to remain to be seen, because we could make choices to cut somewhere else.
Mm-hmm.
But yes, further reductions would absolutely need to be made because our revenue could only go up by so much that following year.
Okay. And if you don't mind, if I could just ask one more question, because I don't think I looked at your budget long enough. But the electric you were talking about, the electrical work, can you explain that again? Because it sounds like we have money that would help to pay for that right now. Like the money we spend, we'd get more money back in grants or from the government. I'm not sure what you said. Is that correct?
So are you referring to the wiring, the one-to-one?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So right now it's called E-rate, and there are matching funds available. So we have to expend 50% of the total project cost, and the remaining 50% would be funded by the E-rate program. But we have to expend that 50% to be eligible to receive the balance of it. So if we cut that from our budget and don't expend that money, we will lose the E-rate funding because it does expire.
Yeah. Is this the kind of thing that could put more electrical outlets in classrooms? I mean, I know there are classrooms that I don't know what it's for.
No, this is more for like our technology network infrastructure. So electrical outlets is an issue in our school for sure, and we will probably talk about that in the COVID budget, but no, this is more technology related wiring.
But it's a one-time expense?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
So that's interesting to know that possibly it could get covered by COVID expenses. And you said you're doing that later. But one-time income for one-time expenses?
No, so the electrical that we're going to talk about under COVID is classroom outlets, that type of electrical. This would be a one-time network wiring cost, but not the electrical component that we're referring to as far as powering classrooms. This is more for technology network.
Okay, so this wouldn't be a one-time cost that could be covered by those one-time. Okay, I appreciate it. Thank you.
No. So they are one-time costs, but we wouldn't want to allocate those to COVID money because, in all honesty, our COVID money is so short that we actually need to expend that on COVID-related measures that need to take place that truly have a higher priority. Sorry, Jim, than the wiring.
Okay, thanks.
Madam Chair?
Yes.
You know what I think, Madam Chair? I think the biggest mistake this town ever made was putting the school committee budget to the town council. The school committee and the town council should be separate. We should be able to submit our budget, have a financial town meeting, get it approved, or get it sunk down, or have amendments made, but this is not right. The town council should not have this much power over the school department and the school committee. Just an observation, Madam Chair. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Florio. Are there any other hands raised, Mr. Murphy? I don't see any.
Nope, that's it.
Okay, thank you. All right, moving on to agenda item number 13, which is the COVID-19 budget discussion. I'm not sure who's going to start this.
I will start it and then smartly turn it over to Ms. Mangiarelli. Mr. Murphy, can you bring up the document? It's quite a lengthy document, but at least if we can bring it up. So we have presented this information to the committee before in terms of looking at our plans, looking at partial reopening, we call it, or hybrid, we call it transition now to full reopening. And I had conversations with Mr. Anderson around this. Obviously, we don't have this money. We've talked about just barely making, our payroll and paying accounts payable, having to hold that. However, we have identified numerous areas. The challenge is that we still may continue to identify areas that we need to improve, areas where we need additional personnel, supplies. And if we get significant amount of funds, then we need the approval of the school committee in terms of how we allocate those funds. We can't just say we get money in and we're going to spend it. So we had presented this before. So tonight we come before you, and I'll turn it over to Sarah, let her explain more in detail. But we're going to need approval that if we do get funds from the federal government, stimulus money or in additional funds, that we have approval to purchase, to go out to hire staff so that we can open safely. And again, Mr. Anderson had suggested or told me that we need to come before the committee. Again, this is only if we are able to get money. We cannot, as Mr. Pearson said, we can't spend money we don't have. But we do need approval. And again, according to the governor, a decision is going to be made on August 31st. We're struggling right now purchasing materials. Like I said before, we're waiting. I'm supposed to pick up PPE next Tuesday from the state. We don't know how much. We don't know what we're getting. We don't have the luxury of ordering stuff and using this as surplus. So again, we're bringing this before you tonight to get approval that if we receive, have the funds available, we'll be able to purchase these to open schools safely. And this may be impacted again, because when I do my conversation about air quality, there's things on there that we're looking at. We're going to have experts come in and look at all of our classrooms and buildings and maybe make some recommendations. We'll have to come back before you. So obviously this is fluid. So Sarah, I'm going to turn it over to you.
And actually, Jim, do you mind putting up the other schedule? I think this will just keep it all on one page for you. So this was actually what I thought I was submitting to RIDE to get our $747,000 application in, but this kind of summarizes it a little bit better. So the base amount is really our pre-COVID budget. Projected actuals includes the impact of COVID. Then there's the COVID impact column. This, I don't really like this term that they use, but the CRF eligible, the Corona Relief Fund that's eligible, I would argue almost everything in that third column is eligible, but I couldn't exceed the $747,000. And then in the last column, you'll see what is not covered with federal funds. And that's really our budget gap that we're showing. So, and just a question did come up in the chat about FY20. So at the very bottom of that other document, I had showed that we are going to receive $747,000 in federal aid. We have a carryover of about 1.3. And then if we don't make the budget cuts of the 1.8 that we presented, that would only leave us 207,000 to put towards the Corona Relief Fund or a Corona Relief response requirements. So this is probably a little bit more concise picture of what the COVID budget is on top of our existing budget. And there are multiple pages in this document that really echo what had been presented earlier on the screen and that we had shared with you. It's just a slightly different format.
Okay, thank you, Sarah. So I'm just going to go down the line here and see if there are any questions. Mr. Florio?
No questions, Madam Chair. It's just very disheartening. That's all it is. Very disheartening that anybody would place us in this situation.
Mr. Murray?
So this is a lot to take in. And, you know, I got to be honest, like, this is a lot of money. And part of our role is oversight. And I don't see federal stimulus coming out within the next 2 weeks. So I guess my basic is, you know, point is, can we have some time to synthesize this and put it to a vote at our next meeting? Because I don't feel comfortable. I don't understand this enough to make a knowledgeable vote on this. And there's questions I definitely have or would like to feel more comfortable with as a school committee member.
So, Mr. Murray, the only comment I'll make to that is, again, A, if we don't have the money, we're not going to spend. But B, if we do receive funds and it hasn't been approved, we can't spend it. And so we have, you know, we're on August, I don't even know the date today, I apologize, but we have not been able to purchase, and as you see, there's significant amount of material. So the concern I have is that'll hold us up. Again, maybe nothing will happen until the 27th, but if funds do come in and we have an approval, we can start ordering and purchasing and hiring. If not, then we're held up. And so that's just the reality. But again, I think the caveat with this is we will not spend anything if we don't have the money.
So Sarah, the money we have from the state, the 700,000 plus, you already have that under in our calculated 21 budget. Is that correct? Or you know, how is this affecting? How does that work in unison with the state funding?
So the 747,000 is really separate and apart from the state budget right now. So these are federal funds that came in that we can use to segregate COVID expenditures. That would be my recommendation. I wouldn't allocate, I think I have one component of a salary towards that 747,000, but the rest, I would use that entire 747,000 for one-time expenditures. So for face masks, thermometers, gloves, gowns, those types of purchases. And we wouldn't expend above and beyond that $747,000 or commit to personnel above and beyond that. And that's why I was saying I would strategically use that just for those one-time purchases. But this is really separate and distinct from the state aid, unless something comes in and they say, oh, by the way, we're backfilling the FY21 state aid cuts with this money. I don't anticipate that to take place with this money, because I think the state is pretty well aware that this is the only fund. These are the only funds that they've given schools to do anything with in response to COVID.
So, but this authorization allows you to move forward with the 747 expenditure up to that, correct?
So I don't know, is John's not on the line anymore. Because I feel like this might be even more of a legal aspect, because we get grants all the time that we can expend against. So I actually don't think it's as much the 747 that you're giving the approval. I actually think it's the balance that if additional funds come in, whether it be town rainy day fund. or, well, I guess that would be really the other big bucket, that we can start moving forward with some of those items that are listed.
So this is my point, right? You already have authority on the monies that have been received from the state, right? So those things can be ordered and you can use it. My issue is that, not having time to review this really, getting through it and understand it. I'm not trying to hold you up, but I feel like I'm constantly held hostage here. Like, make the vote because we can't move forward without it. Well, if that's the case, then I'll just rubber stamp it and go on your way. But I get frustrated as a member because my job is to look at this stuff, understand it before I vote. So what I'm asking is, this is authorization if we get money. Do we have any plans in place with the town to transfer additional funds beyond that 747 to fund any of this? Because I know the feds are still debating on Capitol Hill. That's not going to happen in 2 weeks.
But look,
So
we
what
still
is the
need
prospect of
authorization.
action?
But we still need authorization, and you're right, you do have oversight. But in fairness, this budget had been presented to the committee before. This is not the first time we presented this before when we talked about our reentry plan, and we've been through, we presented the budget. I know there's a lot in it. And like you said, you do have oversight. And the recommendation of the attorney was to make sure that the school committee has approved what we presented in our COVID-19 budget, so that somebody can't come back and say the committee wasn't aware, they didn't approve it. So you're absolutely right. And timing is, again, we don't have the money. You're right, we may not get the money, but if we do, we can move on personnel, we can move on other things that we need. And that's the whole idea, that we will not spend money that we do not have. So it's more the budget, the items we've presented, and getting the approval of the committee. So again, I'm not dictating. The committee can choose to do what they want. And then we're limited until the 28th or 27th when we come back. There's nothing that we can do if, we need to make sure that we have the authority of the school committee on these items if we do receive funds.
Yes, things like buying masks and, the hand sanitizer, all that stuff, I would have been fine with splitting some of that out. When we talk about positions and some longer term costs, I have questions on that. I want to make sure that it's being fully vetted. We're getting pushed into the situation from the state. We're getting pushed some semblance by the public. The fiscal realities of this are problematic. So there's a lot here. And I know there was some broad numbers presented earlier, but this is a lot more granular, unless I didn't see something earlier, a lot more granular than what we've seen at this point. So all I'm asking is, if it's not holding up the administration, there's no dire need to get this done tonight, is to allow us time to properly vet it and just make sure I have a comfortability factor with it. If not, then I'll vote accordingly. That's all. I'm just stating my stance.
If I can just add, I think one of the issues, I certainly appreciate your position as a school committee member. I think it makes no sense that I'm being asked to put forward a budget without a revenue. I've never been ever allowed to put forward a budget that doesn't balance. And we know that even to borrow from the rainy day fund from the town, they have a 10% cap. So, even if we got additional money from the town, we would not cover those costs. And I think that is the frustration that all of my peers are facing and echoing. And I'm not quite sure why it's not being heard at the state level, to be honest with you, because you have concerns in approving something. I think it goes against everything that I'm supposed to do as a professional to put forward a budget like this. As far as the salaries, we have there's a high cost in there. There's not a significant number of different positions that are on there. We have the custodians, really that's bringing back custodians that had been cut previously. We have 7 additional nurses. We would need an additional nurse at each building just to man the COVID pod, so to speak. There's 40 supervisory assistants. Those would be to supervise lunch in classrooms because we really couldn't figure out how to do lunch based on the in-person gathering in the cafeteria, as well as the time that it takes to clean between between each period with the sanitation methods that we would need to use. We'd be serving lunch basically all day to get through some of that. So the staffing, which is the reoccurring costs, and I am more concerned about those because I don't see those costs going away. And that is something that the state needs to deal with at some point, and us on the local level, is that, you know, it's fine and dandy to say we can buy all of these one-time expenditures. So some will need to replace each year. But there is some significant salary and benefit costs that are going to be reoccurring. So even if we get the money this year, it will take long-term planning to figure out how we're going to fund them the following year, especially if there's no federal funds and our local appropriation is level funded this year. You know, that gap from revenue in FY 2022 and expenses is growing as we speak. So I definitely hear your concerns on that. The only expenses that we would move forward, and again, this is really hard because we can't properly plan and prepare without moving forward on some of these expenses, but the only ones that I would sign off on at this point are ones that I know are covered by that $747,000.
So, and I guess that gets to my point, is, you know, we're basically giving you blank authorization up to an amount here that is still, in my opinion, probably not totally finalized because it's a dynamic situation. And so without having funding on one side of the ledger, you know, without fully understanding what's on the other side of the ledger, which isn't funded, you know, we're giving you a kind of a blanket authorization on, let me pull up my computer here, but millions of dollars if they come in. So if the government comes in tomorrow and says you have $5 million, that is the extent of our oversight. We've given you authorization to proceed. And it's not because I don't trust the administration. I trust the administration wholeheartedly. But it goes to our role as a school committee to have that check and balance to make sure that we're thinking everything through. I see nursing stations in here at $100,000 each. Is that the best decision? I have questions on that. We have, you know, I understand why you would have them, but I'm wondering if there's an alternative to that. What has been looked at? What is, so I don't want to bog down the entire meeting with all these questions. All I'm asking is if we can table it. There's 4 other members here, so they may not share my opinion. So I'll leave it at that.
Thank you, Mr. Murray. Mrs. Colonian.
This is all the money they're giving us, huh? 747,000. That's it right now. I went through, I actually read through everything here, and I mean, we don't really have a choice here. In order to get what we need, we have to vote. We have to vote. We have to approve this. So I don't really have any questions. I'm really disappointed that, you know, the state couldn't give us a little bit more, considering that, you know, that what we have, what they gave us doesn't even come close to what we need in order to operate our schools. But that's all I have to say. I don't really have any questions at this time. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Clooney. And finally, Mr. Pearson.
Well, yeah, I have concerns as well. Very, very similar to what Mr. Murray has echoed. Kind of, I'm not, even after explanation, I'm not 100% sure what precisely we'd be approving tonight. Expenditures up to a certain amount from this given list. It's without even actually having a thoughtful discussion of the items on the list and any kind of justification for why they're on there. You know, Mr. Murray mentioned the modular nursing stations. I would love to have a full-fledged conversation about modular nursing stations and the cost associated with them in our existing facilities, and really exploring options or even trying to understand where the heck that came from. I know it's been talked about in previous meetings, but so I have no problem tabling this if that's the will of the committee, to give us more time to digest, formulate some other intelligent questions. However, that said, if it's going to cause a problem by tabling this, in other words, if there are certain purchases, masks, whatever the Department of Health is going to require us to do and not give us money for, if we're not able to do that in time because we held up the money tonight, then that is also, we're not doing our jobs at that point. So tell me we can table it because we're not going to cause a safety issue and maybe we should table it. Tell me we can't table it because it'll cause a safety issue and maybe we have to move forward with a vote. There's my question. It's a tough one. I know. I'm sorry.
Well, no, the bottom line is that, so there's a lot of questions and I wish we had dialogue, and I get, we present a lot of information at like when we presented our reentry plan and we, we're going to talk about a revised plan tonight. Mr. Coward's going to talk about, there's a lot of information that we're sharing. We're bringing this forward. Again, it's something that we've never done before. I hope we never do again. But my concern is, and you have valid points, so I'm not, I don't want to be the one to say tabling is okay because I don't, my job is to protect the committee too. I want to make sure that what I'm saying is that we believe strongly we need to have additional nurses in our building to open. We could talk about the modulars we had presented, but again, I think touring the schools and looking at the nurses stations and looking at the expectations of the Department of Health, and I believe we did, maybe didn't go in the depth that people would like, but we did explain why we felt that they were necessary. Our nurses are looking at how we can work with the situations we have, but there's no way that we can keep people safe if we have, say, identified, if you look at where many of our nursing stations are, they're in the middle, next to the office, no windows. So trying to be as creative, and Black Rock, Tyoke, Hopkins Hill School. So there's a reason why we've been looking at these. That's just the modulars. From the recommendations we've been getting, we have no space that we can make zero pressure where we can completely contain. So. So my concern is if you vote it down, and I'm not saying you can't vote it a different way, that we cannot move forward, and that's not till the 27th, and right now it's going to be challenging to get 7 nurses, right? I believe.
Well,
So
we have a couple issues here, and someone pointed out in the chat, which thank you for doing so. We have a very active audience tonight. Even if we had the 700,000, it's not enough to open schools based on your list here. So, and the governor has delayed the opening of schools by 2 weeks. Maybe is there a compromise? Is it possible we call a special meeting next week to maybe just go over the COVID expenses and the reopening plan and just dedicate an entire meeting workshop to that versus, we have some uncomfortable school committee members, maybe only 1 or 2 of us, but, versus us having to make an uncomfortable vote.
Sure.
Is that enough time if we did something like that, and would the committee be open to that?
Well, I think just to say, we can ask the committee, but I think I put it in my update that there may be a request to have a special meeting next week.
I mean, I don't want to be, Warwick was heavily chastised for their decisions they've made. And if you read what the Warwick School Committee has said, the governor may have been talking out of turn there because, again, there are enormous expectations on us to put significant safety measures in place for students and employees, and there is no funding, and there is abysmal guidance from the state
Yeah.
on how we do so.
I think that's a great idea, though, have a meeting next week. I mean, I don't know if we could be in the same situation, but at least you can ask them, have a chance to review
Otherwise
it
we
and
can
ask questions.
just be like Warwick and say, sorry, we're going virtual learning only because we can't afford this.
I thank everybody for their comments. I'm a little reluctant to move forward tonight if we can't get resolution that somehow we are going to obstruct something that needs to get done. I wouldn't, even if I have the 3 votes, I won't feel comfortable pushing this through. Quite honestly, I think as a committee, we've always tried to build consensus among ourselves. And if Mr. Levison and Mrs. Mangiarelli can't tell us that this will be really an obstructionist move for us not to go forward, and we have the opportunity to have another meeting to discuss this, if in fact money is forthcoming, quite honestly, I will be so surprised if this gets settled even within the next 2 weeks. I just don't think so. And even the $724,000, who knows what we will ultimately really want to spend that on. If this community makes the decision that we really can't open safely like Warwick did, we may find another use for that money rather than buying masks and PPE and who knows what else. So I wish we had a better idea of how much money we ultimately will get from the federal government that goes to the state and then finally to us. But to say that we're going to get $5 million of money to safely change our schools so that they can in fact be safe and ready for in-person teaching, I think is like just something that I can't even imagine that will happen. So I could be wrong, maybe the magic will happen, and we will be able to find the money to do whatever we have to do. But yes, Sarah, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
So my only concern, and I actually agree with the school committee and in general, I think if I was sitting in your position, I would have the same concerns about moving forward. With that said, there are a lot of items that are taking up to a 4-week turnaround from the date that we order. So I would like to be able to get some of those orders in, such as plastic dividers for classroom desks, face masks, some of those things that we know are taking longer to get through, and that $747,000 is COVID response money. So we wouldn't be able to use that to turn around necessarily and bring back sports, so, and I don't even need the full $747,000, but if the school committee would be open for authorizing the expenditure of some of that money so we can get some of those orders in, even if it was $150,000, on strictly, in that supply category, that would definitely be helpful, mostly because of the time delay in getting these items in. So that would be the only caveat that I would ask for your consideration.
Madam Chair, can we amend the amount on the floor to a lesser amount to be able to, personally, I have no issue with the 747 in total. Like, I understand there's a lot of PPE supplies, which is, we exceed $1 million on this list alone, need to be purchased. So I don't know, it's the breadth of what I'm looking at, especially these larger purchases, that I definitely have questions on. So to that point, I don't know if we can approve up to that 747. That would be a proposal to get you going, and then we have the meeting next week, which I am in favor of Mr. Pearson's idea of getting down a little deeper in an exclusive meeting on this. That's
yes, I think that's definitely a possibility. I do not think there was an actual amount per se on our motion. So we could definitely, if we feel comfortable, allowing some orders to, because you're right, there will be delays. Sarah's right about the delays of getting PPE. I would be perfectly happy to consider a motion such as that. And then also that I think we probably need another meeting to just discuss the rest of the things that we are supposedly going to need to actually attempt to open school safely. But I don't know what the committee feels. Mr. Florio, what are you thinking?
Madam Chair, I'm thinking it's 747,000. I have no problem approving the COVID-19 budget as presented. As far as meeting next week, I won't be able to be here because I'll be on vacation. I'll be in state, but I'll be on, we're going away for 3 days and I won't be here. But to be honest with you, that plays nothing into this. If the superintendent and the CFO say we need this COVID-19 budget as presented, Craig may not live here, but Sarah does. And, you know, as you can see, her 2 little kids running back and forth. So I think she's being as transparent as she possibly can. And I have no problem approving the COVID-19 budget. I have no problem at all, Madam Chair, because I know the money's going to be spent the right way. And if she's been transparent all the way through the process, Madam Chair. There's no reason for her not to be at this point. I really believe that we should approve this evening. I really do. And if we get more money, she'll let us know. They will let us know that day. I mean, that's the type of people we're dealing with here. I mean, I'm fine with it, Madam Chair. I'm fine. You know, I don't have an issue with it at all.
Yeah.
And that's Luke, I'm sorry, but that's just how I feel.
And just to be clear, it has nothing to do with trust of the administration. It has nothing to do that this doesn't play into it. It plays into our role to do responsible, you know, review of what the administration puts forward thoughtfully. And we may get through next week and have no changes, and that's fine. But I have a responsibility to my constituents to be able to explain this to them when I get questions and be able to thoroughly understand it. So it has nothing to do with, I 100% believe that if you said we absolutely need this, we're purchasing these things tomorrow and it has to be done, I would trust to move forward. But I know the reality is it's likely a longer timeline. So I'm just asking for some time to be able to vet it out. That's all.
Go ahead, Sarah.
So Jim, can you actually put back up the 2020-0707, just that first page, the Corona Relief Fund? Because this might clarify where I'm looking. So in that 1, 2, 3, 4th column over the CRF eligible, those are really the subcategories. And if you scroll down, you'll see the items that we have listed. But truly, the numbers that I'm looking at, and I wouldn't necessarily move forward with 100% of this all at once until we had a better idea. But it's really the supply and the equipment line. You know, purchase services, additional transportation. Really, we need to have a better handle on who's coming back to do the proper routes before that even takes place. I think we'd be okay holding off on the salaries and benefits that I had allocated there. And honestly, when this is all said and done, I will most likely end up pulling that out and dropping more supplies and equipment in. So as of right now, truly the only numbers that I'm looking at is that 371 and the 113 to kind of get moving on. So that wouldn't include the nursing pods, because I understand that is a significant purchase that we want to discuss more. But those are truly more of the PP&E type purchases that would need to be made.
That seems like a pretty good compromise. I don't know how the rest of
So that's 484 $611, Madam Chair.
Yep. So are we ready to move that we would approve that piece of the budget for COVID-19 supplies and materials?
Yep, I am, Madam Chair.
Motion.
Okay, I make a motion to approve the COVID-19 budget of $484,611, and with the understanding that these funds will be expended to cover said expenses, and at some future period, we reconvene to discuss the remaining amount.
I second the motion.
All right. Are there any further questions or concerns from committee members before I ask the public?
I just did the motion mention COVID-related expenses? I know it's a formality, but.
Yes.
I believe it did, yes.
Okay.
Yes.
All right, perfect.
Okay. Any other comments from the committee before I ask any attendees? Seeing none, Mr. Murphy, are there some questions from the audience before I call for a vote?
Yes, there's two.
Okay.
Renee, you are up. Please state your name for the record.
Yep, Renee Smith, and you need my address?
Yes,
Okay, 3 Wildflower Drive.
thank you.
So I'm very, well, I don't say very relieved, but somewhat relieved to see the conversation that was in the Q&A and that Mr. Pearson and Mr. Murray mentioned. You know, one of my big concerns, I'm sure is everybody's, is that schools are open safely, not safely, but to be safe. And I agree that you know, I know, I heard what the governor said about Warwick and all of that, but my feeling is there a contingency plan? What are the thoughts if we do not have enough money at all? This is all we have is the $700,000 and we cannot open schools, that we are able to say, we are not able to open schools safely, so therefore we're not doing it. You know, I don't want to compare it to my kitchen, but if I were to hire somebody to open, you know, redo my kitchen, and I gave them what I had, and all it allows them to do is remove my countertops and put in new cabinets, I'm not getting a finished kitchen. And I know that's oversimplifying it, but my point is, if we don't have the money to do this, then it shouldn't be done. I agree that that money that we do have, since it can only be used for COVID materials like masks and things like that, makes sense. I don't agree with anything that can't be used in other manners or returned or in some way repurposed. I imagine the, you know, very expensive pods aren't easily returned to the store or anything. So again, that's one of my biggest concerns, is that if we can, I want to make sure that everybody realizes if we cannot open schools safely, even if the governor says we have to, that we can say, no, this isn't happening. We don't have the money to do it.
Okay, thank you, Renee. Anyone else, Mr. Murphy?
Yes. Kelly, you're up. If you could just state your name and address for the record.
Sure, Kelly Aronakis, 9 Sugar Maple Drive. Double concerns. I'm a parent of 2 and a teacher in the district. So one of my concerns is, as the union president, I have the privilege of visiting all of the buildings. And that being the case, I'm even more worried as a parent. So my fear, I understand financially exactly why the committee is saying what it's saying. I get your fiduciary responsibility. I have larger fears just knowing the lay of the land. So for example, if we open, you have to hire the nurse. When a staff member, a student, and you look at the openings around the country, it's going to happen. Someone's going to get COVID. They have to be isolated in certain areas. No one can get nurses now pre-COVID. When we have a nurse that's out sick, it's extremely difficult to replace a nurse. The districts that are putting their plans together are out doing all the recruiting they possibly can. So Craig and I meet with the 9-district consortium that we're in. They are out looking for those nurses now. By the time we get around to doing it, there's going to be none left. The PPE, at some point, I don't know if that's August, September, October, or February, April, at some point we get back to school, COVID's not going to go away. Those supplies are still going to be needed. So I guess my concern is knowing the supplies are going to be needed at some point, delaying them is kind of like when we couldn't find toilet paper. You don't want to be the last one to the store and you can't get any of the supplies. So I'm very concerned there. I agree with the parent Renee Smith who spoke. I saw that work took a lot of heat too. And I actually commended them. They had the same exact conversation you were having. I don't know if anybody watches their meetings, but I try to watch other meetings. They were having the exact same conversations. Without the money coming through from the state or the CARES Act, they knew that the plans they were writing could not come to fruition. So they just called it to send the message that it can't happen safely. As a teacher, there could be nothing worse than not meeting my kids. Kids work because they like their teachers and have a relationship with them. So as a teacher, if I don't get to meet my kids, it's going to be hell all year. As a parent, I don't want you to open schools if you can't guarantee my kids are safe. And knowing that there are too many rooms that have no ventilation, they don't have circulating air. The experts are telling us the air exchanges have to happen 6 times an hour. We don't have air exchanges once an hour. 75% of the virus is picked up through droplets in the air. So I want you to keep my kids safe. I want you to keep the adults safe. I understand the dilemma you're in, but at some point we're going to get back to school. And again, we don't want to be out of toilet paper. So those are my comments. Thank you.
Yeah, I would like to respond a little bit to that. Kelly, I hear you and I know what you're saying. And like I said, I am not against authorizing up to the 747 tonight because we have that. That has been allocated to COVID only. And I agree, we need to make sure that we're jumping ahead. I'm fairly certain that positions have already been posted for a number of these COVID related items. So custodians, nurses. Sarah, can you chime in on that? Have these positions already been posted?
So I believe that we posted those as anticipated positions, but we really can't move forward and we don't, this is the catch, we don't want to make a commitment because then for unemployment reasons and whatnot, should we make that commitment, they become our employees. So it's a catch-22, but we posted as anticipated.
There's no interview scheduled.
So here's my point. We don't have the money. Even if we provide this authorization, there is nothing in the bank account. And when I asked for a couple of weeks to look at this, I don't see it as holding anything up. I think it's very good points by Kelly and Renee about our current situation. We have a small percentage of money to reopen schools with the state mandate that has been driven down on us. And that's not to say I'm against opening schools, but I am for opening schools safely. And if we're saying the need is $5 million and we're rushing and falling over ourselves to go shovel money out the door to fix the problem, then maybe we need to be a little bit more thoughtful in our approach. So I just want you to know that I hear you. We're not trying to hold up the administration. I want them to keep moving. I know they've been moving and I commend them for that. But we also have to be thoughtful on how we're doing it and not just accept what everybody pushes down on us, saying, this is all just going to work and it's peaches and roses. It's not. We have to deal with the reality in front of us. So,
yeah, Madam Chair, can I just respond?
Absolutely.
So let me be clear that we're obviously I have a responsibility as superintendent to the students and families in this community, because we know as a school go, as does a community go. If I was asked today, would we open schools, I would tell you no. And I'll talk more about that when we get into the air quality. So, but the flip side is that we have a responsibility to do everything in our power to plan. And so all this budget is, and to be clear, realistic or not that we get the funds, we spend a lot of time, a lot of people looking at what we would need to put in place. And we'll have a better conversation about this next week. To open safely. And I've said all along, when anytime you've heard me speak, the laser beam focus is going to be on safety for students, whether it's 10 students and 10 teachers or the entire school. And so I think we've been clear about that. But we'd be, again, I'm fully supportive of what's being presented tonight, the conversation, but I want to be clear that there's, this isn't a pie in the sky wish list. This is what we believe needs. Warwick said 15 million. I think the difference, their committee decided to, pull the plug now. We have a little bit of time. We continue to plan our buildings. Our principals will be posting them next week. I've been working with their staff tirelessly to put together the granular plans. So, we will not open school. At least my recommendation to this community would be to not open school if we can't do it safely. And I know there's a lot of pressure. That's why I presented before about what the governor's saying and, pointing the finger at Warwick. I think it's, the last thing we need right now is finger pointing. We need to recognize how hard districts are working to try to open safely. So, but I want to be clear. We've never said that, oh, this is going to happen and we're going to open safely. These are plans that we're putting together, the best thinking, the best information we have. And yes, we said we think we need about, approximately whatever the number was, 5 million something. But I just want to be clear. We will not open if we cannot open safely.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Levis. Were there any other comments from the crowd, Mr. Murphy?
Yes, there's one more person.
Thank you.
Lori, please state your name and address for the record.
Lori LaPerch, and I live on Hope Furnace Road. I have a suggestion for the nurses that are being spoken about. Would it be an idea to maybe bring in CNAs, as they are just as qualified to take temperatures, see if children are sick? They would be at a lower cost and keep the budget down instead of increasing the budget. I know we keep on hopping on the budget, but I'm just thinking CNAs as another way where you still have a head nurse and then the CNAs can help the head nurse as well as stay in different pods.
I believe, Lori, and again, I'm not the expert. I'll get information, but my understanding is that we would be able to hire RNs, but not a CNA. And years ago, they used to have the LPNs, and we would not be able to utilize an LPN. It would have to be an RN.
Okay.
It's a great suggestion, though.
It's just a lower cost. Like they're
Right,
just as qualified. It would get everything done, and it would keep a budget at a lower level to put that money towards other things. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Laurie. Anyone else, Mr. Murphy?
Yes, there's another. Amanda, you're next. Please state your name for the record.
Hi, it's Amanda Aldana, and I just wanted to take a second and really just thank all of you. I know this is very complex and it's a very difficult situation. You're going to make people upset or happy either way you go, and I know there's a lot of things that you guys are putting into it, and you're just I just want to say, I really, really appreciate everything that you guys are doing. So that was the only comment I wanted to say. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Amanda. That's greatly appreciated by all of us. Anybody else, Mr. Murphy?
It looks like that's it.
Okay, thank you. So we have a motion and a second. I think I'll call for the vote. Could we have a vote, please? Roll call vote.
Kathy Patnode?
Yes.
Dave Florio,
Yes.
Luke Murray,
Yes.
Donna Colunian. Donna Colunian. You're muted.
Yes.
James Pearson.
Yes.
Okay, thank you, everyone. Okay, I guess we can move on to another huge issue for our public schools. Number 14, which is the Coventry Public Schools air quality discussion. And I'll hand this over to you, Mr. Levis, to start.
All right, let me bear with me here. All right. So before I get started, or I guess that's not true because I have started. There was a request from the Department of Ed that was sent to superintendents, districts, charter schools, and said that they were inviting us to the Asa Messer Elementary School in Providence last Friday, and we received it earlier in the week. They were going to have an expert there, Dr. Erin Bromage, and he was an expert in infectious disease. And he was going to show our directors of facilities some practical ways of improving air quality. So Jason Martin went, Mr. Coward's wife, Jen Coward, that also works for the Cranston schools in terms of communications, was there. And so the whole idea was we were invited, Rhode Island Department of Health was there to look at older buildings and to give us some practical solutions. And so what transpired, I remember getting a call from Jason afterwards, and Mr. Cower and I spoke. We walked away with many more concerns. So what I want to say is this presentation is really about air quality pertaining to COVID-19, the virus. I know it was brought up before about air quality in our schools, but we have our schools tested continuously. We have many issues in our schools. The middle school has many issues. A lot of it's around humidity, which is a problem with COVID-19, but we've had, we had that incredible mold issue last year when the system shut down. We had a company come in and clean every single area. So we have our air quality tested under normal conditions. And while there may be, concerns people have, we have concerns about the HVAC system, but in terms of being safe, we'd have to shut down if it wasn't. But this presentation has to do with the transmission of the disease when it's airborne. And so this is an outcome of that presentation that Mr. Martin attended. So again, I just mentioned we were invited by Dr. Braun to come to the SMS school. Dr. Erin Bromage, and again, you can see PhD in microbiology, immunology. He's an expert consultant in finding solutions to keep people safe. He consults to school districts in Massachusetts. He actually consults to the whole federal court system. He's a professor at UMass. And if you Google him, you'll see he's been on CNN, many national broadcasts, international, especially around air quality pertaining to the COVID virus. So one of the takeaways that came from this is he talked about we're spending a lot of time, effort, money on surface transmission. And he was saying that that only takes place about 5% of the time. People catch COVID-19 or get this virus, majority of the people it's through airborne transmission. And so he was talking about looking at every single individual classroom and assessing, is it appropriate? Does it have the right conditions? Because if you can put the right conditions in place, you can get rid of about approximately 90% of the chance of catching this. But the key is, can we make the conditions appropriate? Somebody had talked about in the chat room about retrofitting our elementary schools. And so we're going to talk about some practical things that need to take place, but the question is, can we do it? What's the cost, and how quickly can we get the supplies? Are they available? he had mentioned that we need to bring fresh air into classrooms. That's the most important thing. I believe somebody had talked about, I think Kelly Aronakis had talked about the exchange. How often is air exchanged in our classrooms? So especially for our interior classrooms, he's talking about 6 times per hour. So these are things that I cannot answer today. I can tell you what classrooms are interior classrooms, what classrooms have windows. Mr. Martin went through our entire school. He mentioned that just having windows open, so we know a lot of our schools have access to the outdoors, but he had mentioned just having the windows open is not enough. His recommendation was having a box fan that blew out. You know, one of the issues we have is that we have many schools, Black Rock, Hopkins Hill, Tyoke, that only have 2 outlets. So his recommendation would be, you can't use extension cords with box fans, even if we can get them. So how safe can we make those rooms even if we could get box fans? Need to exchange air a minimum of 6 times per hour. Many of our schools have HVAC systems with filtration. He was mentioning that there's a filter, and it's a MERV 13. It's the best filter we can get. Jason checked today with companies. Turnaround on those filters is about 7 to 9 weeks. And the other part that we probably have is when we put these filters in, it was explained to me like kind of suck air with a straw if you pinch the straw, that our systems, our HVAC systems are old. And so this could really tax our HVAC system. It would capture a lot of the particles, the COVID-19, especially if it can, you know, exchange the air, you know, 6, 7 times an hour. Again, we don't know if our systems could handle this. And everything that I'm saying about we don't know, we're trying to get experts into our schools to look at every single class and do walkthroughs. I actually sent an email to Dr. Bromwich right after I received this information, asking if he or a colleague could come out. Because again, talking about safety and making sure that we bring people back into situations that are safe, we want to make sure that we do everything in our power to assess what the safety is and what our needs. What can we do to rectify the situation? A major issue is humidity level. We know in the middle school we have extreme cases where there's humidity in certain parts of the building. We've recently just purchased, I think, 4 industrial dehumidifiers. This has been a constant problem. Mr. Murray talked about how the building committee has targeted and recognized that this, you know, we need to do something drastic to the middle school moving forward. Humidity needs to be, again, 40 to 60%. This is New England. September, October could be extremely humid. And having an air conditioner, not all of our classrooms have air conditioners, and he said it's a double-edged sword because while it may bring the humidity level, the optimum level 60%, you know, COVID-19 comes out of the body at 100% humidity. But what you change with the air conditioner, especially the ones that go in the window, is it circulates that COVID quicker around the room. So there's a give and take. Dr. Bromwich said that addressing air transmission of COVID-19 is more important than surface transmission. So everything we've been talking about for the most part is we've been looking at, you know, all the PPE, but we've been looking at, we have those electrostatic sprayers. We've been talking about making sure we clean high traffic areas, bathrooms, doorknobs frequently. And while he's saying that's important, but we really should concentrate our efforts on airborne transmission. And again, this took place last Friday. Classrooms without windows should not be used without proper filtration and air exchange 6 times per hour. So if you spend time in the high school, you know that we have many, many classrooms there. So this is all information that we just received, and Mr. Martin and I and Ms. Mandrelli have talked. We want to get experts that can come in, third party. I'm not comfortable, nothing with our own people, but I want to make sure that we have experts that come in that can look at our situation based on this information and give us some critical feedback in terms of, can we make these rooms safe and what will it take to make them safe? And that's where it goes back to, obviously, funding. And again, this is just quickly summarizing this presentation that took place last Friday. But what does this mean for Coventry? So we are going to inventory, and I just said this, every single classroom for air circulation, ventilation, humidity level, and air exchange. We feel that that's our responsibility based on this information to do that. Dr. Bromwich also said that where we have a stable pod and students are staying in the room, you know, he talked a lot about social distancing. While RIDE is saying, or Department of Health, 3 feet is acceptable, he's saying 6 feet is better, but 10 feet is best. He's also saying, though, that in between any exchange of students leaving a classroom, and this would be important for our high school, there needs to be at least 30 minutes between groups needed to clear the air in a classroom. Think about it, 30 minutes. He also said on a bus, we should leave the bus with windows open for 30 minutes before we bring additional students on. Okay, outside air infiltration kills 90% of transmissions. So as superintendent, my responsibility is to look at, do we have the ability to bring outside air in? What is our level of filtration? How many exchanges can we have in classrooms? And again, you know, today is August 13th. So there's a lot of work for us to do to even determine, you know, how safe are our buildings. We talked about supply need, MERV 13 filters, fans, box fans. He suggested that if you had an air conditioner window, it's better to put a box fan that would blow out. HEPA filters. We're also looking at tents. I know tents, you know, some people say tents are ridiculous, but we're thinking that even if and I've had conversations with different administrators, different educators, even if we weren't open, the power of, you know, he's talking about being outside. He would not go to a restaurant and eat indoors, but he would be very comfortable sitting outside, socially distancing. What is the possibility of using tents to meet students, greet students? Even if we were to go back distance learning, would there be an opportunity to bring people together in a safe way to get to know who their teachers are? If we need to work with specialized populations, we all know that certain students need that contact. Could we utilize tents to make that type of service or intervention happen? So Mr. Martin's looking at quotes. We're talking about big industrial commercial tents. Again, this is New England. There'd be many times where they wouldn't be appropriate. But we want to, again, look at what are our possibilities that we can do to ensure safety. Current funding, condition of our buildings. We've talked about that obviously at night. We're struggling to look at just purchasing some PPE. We have $700 and some odd thousand that Ms. Mangioli had said, but we still don't have access to that. I mean, I think it's clear that we do not have access to that. RIDE has not determined how we're even going to request those funds. And then the condition of our buildings. We are, you know, Mr. Murray did a presentation about where we're at. We've recognized that, how important looking at our buildings for the future is. The stage 2 in terms of, you know, all of our buildings need some work. You know, and how do we develop a plan that addresses the needs of our facilities long-term, knowing that we can't fix everything at once. But, you know, many of our buildings, we haven't received, we received $200,000 in capital last year, but prior to that, for 10 years, there'd been no investment in our buildings in terms of the infrastructure. So these are all things that have an incredible impact. And this is one of the statements Dr. Bromwich had made. If we can't ventilate or filtrate, we can't open safely. So again, I want to be clear that we're not trying to force a square peg through a round hole here. But I think we're doing due diligence. And again, this information just came out Friday. We had a meeting with superintendents and union leadership, I believe it was Tuesday, and talked about this. We're actually putting a letter together to the governor, to the commissioner about funding and about safety and opening schools safely. Somebody had said we're not gonna make a decision. I know I'm not gonna make a decision that pleases everybody. As long as we keep that laser beam focus on student and staff safety, you know, I'm willing to stand by that. So long story to summarize, we have a lot of work to do around our facilities. We're actively looking at getting individuals in. I know our architect who has some experience is going to do a walkthrough in several of our schools. we need to go in and really look at every single classroom. So I don't have the answers around this, but I want the community to know that this information just came to us. We're very serious about looking at every single space we have and making an assessment on that space. And I believe that's one of the, what Warwick had done. This information had just come to them as I'm presenting to the committee, and they recognize that, their buildings are extremely old and they can't meet a lot of this criteria in any of their classrooms. We may come to the same conclusion, but my responsibility, I think, is we get that information presented to the school committee and to the community. So I believe that's all I have for the presentation. And I will keep the community and the school committee informed about what our next steps are. Right now, we're looking at trying to get, experts into our buildings to look at the space. We can open windows, but Dr. Bromwich said that opening the windows, when you look at a lot of our elementary schools, a lot of our schools have access, classrooms have access to fresh air, but he said that's not enough. And then what's the reality of getting 1,000 box fans, 500 box fans? He also had mentioned that we could put commercial HEPA filters, but place them up on the wall. Again, there's a cost to that, and there's availability issues in classrooms. So, we have to focus on those spaces. And Jason went through and marked off. I have the detailed, building plans that have rooms marked off, and it goes back to looking at, our nurses' spaces. Most of our nurses' spaces, we'd have to make some serious renovations to make them appropriate. So that was the whole idea. Again, we'll discuss it more next week. But I just wanted to let you know, I have grave concerns. If you asked me tonight, could we open school safely? I would say emphatically no. Are we buying time? Did the governor buy time? I believe the governor bought time to get funding. But we've seen, again, I want to be clear, we do not have access to funds yet, right? We are August 13th. We're talking about spending $700,000, but we still haven't been notified of a way to really receive those funds. So, there'll be more to come in terms of, probably not next week, but definitely in our August 27th school committee meeting. Hopefully you'll have a lot more information. So we share the same concerns that many people share around air quality. I think Kelly had brought that up and Kerry had brought that up. So I promise that we're going to do due diligence. And again, experts are going to cost money to come in. Nobody's going to come in and do this for free. So that's it. That's my presentation.
Thank you, Mr. Levis. Very enlightening. So I'm just gonna go down the line. Mr. Florio, do you have any questions or comments about this particular presentation?
Yes, I do, Madam Chair. If we're placing our students and our staff at risk, I can't see opening up schools, Madam Chair. If the way Mr. Levis describes it, it's a public safety issue. And if Warwick, our schools, many of them are as old or older than some of the Warwick schools. And it's a shame that we've been put through this roller coaster where we've had committees and we've had different committees look at the reopening of schools. And it's the COVID virus. As of today, there were 74 cases, 2 more deaths. And the news isn't getting any more, it's not getting any more encouraging. And if we place our children in an unsafe environment, Mr. Levis is right, we can't open schools. And the governor has to understand that. And it puts us in a very difficult situation as a school committee, because I don't think we should be labeled obstructionists if we can't open the schools and we don't have the funds available, the millions of dollars available to open the schools properly and to have proper ventilation. It's as a person who has allergies and has, some breathing issues, this is going to make it very difficult for kids that are asthmatic, kids who have breathing issues, kids that are on inhalers. It's not worth it, Madam Chair. It's not worth it. And I think that I don't want to complain or or put anybody down, but this puts us in a very bad place, Madam Chair, because if children can't go back to school, then a lot of parents, it's a lot of parents are going to have to pay more for daycare and for people watching out for their children and babysitters and teachers. It's putting teachers at risk and the community as a whole at risk. A lot of children go home to their grandparents at the end of the day and they give them a hug. They say, "Hey, how are you?" And they don't know they have COVID, but nobody does. So, Madam Chair, I'm very disheartened by what Mr. Levis had to say, and I'm glad I'm on school committee, Madam Chair, because we care. We care for our kids, and I know you do, Madam Chair, and I think we all do, and none of us want to put children at risk. Thank you, Madam Chair. That's all I have to say.
Thank you, Mr. Florio. Mr. Murray.
I want to thank Mr. Levis and also Jason Martin, who I know has been run a little bit ragged. I was at my meeting today at the middle school and he came bursting through the door from another meeting and trying to juggle all the responsibilities he has right now with the facilities. I think it highlights a problem we've had for probably a long time. It's coming to a head now because of COVID, and had we addressed it sooner, which we had no ability to do, I'm not blaming this administration at all. It goes to the point where we haven't made the necessary investments to address a lot of these issues sooner. And maybe we can take a different path for the future with the building effort coming up and create a sustainable path that might address this, because this isn't just about COVID. Some things as simple as the flu, the common cold, all of this goes to air quality. So I think we're taking the right approach, data driven. You get the information, you hire the experts, you figure it out. I think superintendent's right. We've got to keep analyzing the data right up until the time it's logical to pull the trigger on a decision one way or the other. I agree. I think the governor gave herself a little bit of time because she saw the writing on the wall that we weren't ready. A lot of districts aren't ready. They can blast Warwick all they want, but if you want to set an artificial timeline on something that's an extremely dynamic situation, have overly optimistic expectations on funding and budgets, this is what you get. So I just want to say thank you. I look forward to the additional results we get, figuring out if there is a plausible solution, and that data will provide us with more clarity on which way we have to go.
Thank you, Mr. Murray. Mrs. Colonian?
I thank you for the presentation, Craig. I can't say that I'm surprised at the fact that, our schools just aren't there. There's no way that and I agree, I don't know if we can open safely or not. It's like Luke said, everything's coming to a head right now because of COVID. You know, we've neglected the schools, and I'm not talking about we as a school committee, I'm talking about we as a town have neglected the schools for so long. And now we're at a point where we have to make the schools work and be safe enough for our children and our teachers. And it's kind of a dire situation. I don't have that much to say, but you know, I know that in the end we'll do the right thing, I think.
Thank you, Mrs. Colonian. Mr. Pearson.
Believe it or not, I don't have much to say at this point. Thank you.
My final thoughts on this. I personally respect Dr. Bromage's work. He has and was very instrumental in some of the original research, diagrammatic schematics as to how air filtration, even in a restaurant or in a business, like a high, you know, an office building, how the effect of the circulation can in fact cause infection downstream, so to speak, from the ventilation. So he's got a lot of press recently because of his work. And I don't think you can just, you know, say it doesn't matter that he's not an expert. Because I think there will be some pushback. Probably there's been pushback from the Department of Ed that, you know, maybe he's not 100% correct. Obviously, our schools can't handle filters that would absolutely tax our ventilation systems so that they couldn't even work perhaps and break down. So I think we have a huge problem on our hands. And my only ray of hope is that maybe we'll be able to, you know, erect some tents outside, especially our elementary schools, so that our students may at least have the opportunity to meet their teachers and have some early learning in the fall before the cold weather sets in. But I agree with everyone. We need to have you know, more experts come in and actually make that determination for us so that our community, our parents, everyone in the community will understand if we have to make that decision that our ventilation in our schools will not allow us to allow our kids to go back and our staff to go back safely. So that's still obviously going to be on the table and something that we will have to consider. And I'm glad that this has been brought up. I'm glad that the Department of Ed invited him to that school in Providence, and that there were a lot of people there. And I feel completely confident in Jason Martin's ability to let us know whether or not, you know, we can actually provide ventilation. And I think in Warwick, I read something just yesterday that the school committee there basically said, how can we purchase 1,000 fans to try to make, you know, air quality good enough in an individual classroom that doesn't have good ventilation. So I understand why they made the decision they made. And but anyway, that's it from me. It looks like we have a couple of hands up. So Mr. Murphy, would you like to bring anybody in?
Yes. Okay, Shane, you're up. If you could just state your name and address for the record. And you'll have to unmute yourself as well. Shane, are you with us? Okay, we'll move on to the other person. Lori, you're up.
There we go. I thought the presentation was great. I do have a couple of questions though. is there a way to upgrade the high school to accommodate for the elementary kids to go in there, and they would have their own wings, and then make the necessary adjustments to the elementary schools and the middle school, and kind of bring back those kids on when they're ready to go? That way they're sort of being staggered, but we're looking to bring back kids in a safe way. But if we can update one school, and the high school is the biggest one, that can hold the most students. And I understand we have high schoolers, 9, 10, 11, 12, middle schoolers, 6, 7, 8, and 5 elementary schools. But if we can bring the high school up to whatever code it needs to be brought up to, we can house all of the elementary schools. And even if we need to bring them in and have them go alphabetical order, however hybrid, however that would work out, we would at least have one school, some of the students in a safe environment, which would allow the other schools to be updated on an as needed or as on a continuous basis. So we have something going for now and something that we're working on.
Let me just, Lori, I think first things first is just in looking at some of the advice Dr. Bromwich had given us and Mr. Martin going around, the high school probably has the most spaces that right now we have put on, blocked off in red, because there's many interior classrooms. And so I think the first thing is we need to really look and see each one of our spaces, which is, going to be a tremendous task to see what actually is entailed in terms of making the space safe. And so we need to look at, like Warwick had said, Ms. Padno had said, can you get box fans for some of the classrooms that have outside windows? Can we get HEPA filters? Can we get these MERV 13 filters? How frequently does the air circulate? We have these in some of our elementary schools, actually the Tioga, Black Rock, Hopkins Hill, in a portion of Western, we have what's called EVR, stands for Energy Recovery Ventilator, and it circulates the air. But we need to know how these were put in because of air quality years ago. So we need to get those assessed again, look at how often do they circulate the air? Is the air filtered? So there's a lot of work that we have to do. But to your point, one of the things that Dr. Bromwich did say is he felt that alternating students, reducing the number of students in a school and alternating them, we had a lot of pushback about what's called the hybrid model, but he felt that a version of the hybrid model was the safest way, not bringing all the students back. So, my long-winded way of saying is we're not there yet. We don't, we don't know what rooms we really can use safely in any of our buildings right now. We have ideas, but I'm not comfortable just thinking that they might be safe. We want to get experts in to look at them.
Absolutely, absolutely. I was just looking at a bigger picture and thinking completely out of the box of just swapping everybody. If we're in such a hot mess, why not try to start somewhere and go with it and see what can happen.
And the last thing I'll say is that there's a lot, again, this is just my opinion, but there's a lot of pressure to get young children in, and all of them in. And we've presented that. We have a lot of concerns and about that, because of social distancing and just safety. But we also believe, when we took a strong stand, I think, as a task force, and Mr. Carr will talk more about it, the next agenda item, I believe, but we think it's important. We have many students that are high school students, many middle school students that need contact with teachers. We have many students that have special needs across the board that we feel need to have contact with their teachers. We have certain populations that we want to try to get in more frequently if we can get students in buildings safely. So we took a stand that, going back to our All Kids agenda, our transitional model, which was formerly our hybrid model, gets everybody in for a period of time, but it reduces the numbers of students in by social distancing. And so, we want to take that stand that we think if we can get students in, we want to try to get everybody in. I think Ms. Patno had said, to meet their teachers, to have that contact, because it's so important. And so that's kind of that is the stand that we had taken moving forward. But again, first things first, let's identify how safe our classrooms are.
Absolutely, and if they are not safe, they should not go back. I agree with that.
And we won't send people back, like I said, but I want to make sure that we have a third party. Nothing against any of our people, but this is important. We need to get this right. And again, we've been putting a lot of effort into other areas in terms of making school safe, sanitation, disinfecting. And, Dr. Bromwich had said to us Friday that we're wasting, our resources and our time. We should be really focused on the airborne transmission. And that's what we're doing right now.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Laurie. Anybody else? Mr. Murphy?
Okay, let's try Shane again one more time.
Okay.
Shane, are you there?
Shane just needs to unmute.
He may have hit the button by accident. I'm going to bring Mr. Martin in.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, Jason, you're in.
Good evening, all. How are you?
We're good. Thanks, Jason.
I'm not going to take any of your time. I just want you to know that we are absolutely going to bring in the best people that we can find to make sure that what we're offering to our students and teachers is safe and ready for them to return. I take it very seriously. I learned a lot at that meeting on Friday. And I do want to shout out to my employees, my custodians. I know Mr. Murray noticed it this morning. They have really worked hard over this long time to get the buildings ready, and they can't wait to have their kids and faculty back. But they know that it has to be right, and it has to be safe. I just wanted to put that out there.
Thank you so much, Jason. We really appreciate you and your staff, and we trust that you will make good decisions for us.
Good night.
Good night.
Thanks, Jason.
Okay, that's it.
All right, thank you, Mr. Murphy. Okay, I guess we can move on to 15, which is a reopening update.
So this is where Mr. Cowart is going to earn his money tonight. So, but all kidding aside, he's done a phenomenal job, as our administrators, our task force, our teacher leaders throughout the district and support staff. Right now, everybody's working hard at the building level, really planning down to the granular. Like I said, next week we should be publishing those granular plans, again, driven by safety. So you may see things in there and say, well, we can't do this. And so we've stated, and Don will tell you, going back to the governor's 5 benchmarks, everybody's saying, well, the governor's going to make a decision, but it was clear when she let those 5 benchmarks, while the first 3 may have a lot to do with the state in terms of, state readiness, municipal readiness, in terms of, infection rate, testing, capability and readiness, supply readiness and operational readiness, which is everything we've been talking about tonight, right? I mean, funds have a major portion of impact on that. Those should be at our level. They are at our level. So my feeling is that the governor said every one of these benchmarks has to be acceptable. So we know, based on tonight's conversation, supply readiness and operational readiness is not acceptable to not only Coventry, to many districts. And that's what will drive our decision. So having said that, I want to turn over to Don if you want to talk about our revision. Ride had given us feedback on our plan, and we incorporated that feedback, and we met with the task force and administrators and our teacher leaders. And so thank you, Don.
Jim, can you put up that schematic that I sent you earlier? While Jim does that, let me just put some of this into context. When we first started thinking about reopening and doing what was required by the state, they offered up 4 scenarios that they wanted us to look at. And one of the scenarios was a full return. And in the full return scenario, they said they wanted every student back in school. And so when we worked with our consortium group of schools, we came up with a hybrid, and we actually felt the hybrid was full return because it brought every student back. We just framed it in a hybrid method so that we could do it safely with smaller, stable groups than what a full return with every student every day would look like. So we came up with the hybrid model. The reason why I bring that up is we called that a full return. When RIDE gave us our feedback, they actually called that a partial return. And it was really semantics because we were saying full return means full student body, and they were saying full return really meant full week, like every single day of the week. So it was kind of a semantical pushback. So when we got our feedback, we went back into this schematic that I had originally shared in our original plan and on our website, and we updated it. And so I'm gonna kind of go through what the feedback was and how we made some changes. And I'm gonna try to be brief because all of this is available online. And then obviously we'll take any questions. Jim, is there any way you can make that bigger by zooming in a bit? I can't see my own thing. Okay, so there was two major pieces of pushback. So because they called our hybrid model a partial return, their first piece of feedback was our partial return didn't have full return for elementary students, meaning our hybrid model didn't have all elementary students pre-K to 5 coming into school 5 days a week. It wasn't included, and that's because our hybrid model, as I explained earlier, really wasn't set up that way. So the first thing they wanted was a model that had full return of students at the elementary level being the priority. So that was the first piece of feedback that we addressed. And then the second piece of feedback had to do with what they call the partial in-person and the limited in-person. And so a partial in-person plan represents the fact that 50% of the student body comes back. And a limited means 25% of the student body comes back. And a lot of people have asked me through social media, through emails directly to my email box, or even in some of these Q&As, what determines full return, hybrid return, partial, limited? How is that determined? Well, there's the 5 metrics that the superintendent talked about earlier, but there was also, and embedded in those 5 metrics is this rate of spread, and they're looking at the rate of spread in a few different ways. And so to answer the question, the Department of Health and the governor's office really are the ones that say where we are in terms of those first 3 metrics that the superintendent mentioned: rate of spread and testing capability. So if the governor said, you know, based on the rate of spread, I am advocating for a partial return, what the governor is saying is bringing back 50% of our kids, but they want us to have a focus on elementary students in that 50% return. So that's the feedback we got. So what I did is I took this chart and I kind of changed it around a little bit to try to answer those questions. So all the way to the right, I put in a column that, you know, almost everybody on the call tonight probably agrees is very undoable based on everything that's been discussed. And that's every student, full return, every student, every day. And for that to happen, obviously we believe all 5 metrics have to be, all readiness areas have to be fully met. And we have, you know, we believe that we have to have, you know, a consistent decreasing spread, and we have to have all of the ventilation and filtration in place, and everything has to be exactly the way it needs to be to make sure our staff and our students are safe. So that's a full return. I left in the hybrid, but we rebranded it as a transition. And the reason why we rebranded it is because that's my way of showing the Department of Ed how we're going to transition into a full return for elementary. And the way we would do that is we would start with the hybrid, just like we have put into our original plan. And then we would look at the number of students that we have enrolled in school, and how many students have selected distance learning, and how many students are coming in. And then we could assess that data. And after a short period of time, if we're able to, you know, feel that we're successfully bringing back students and it's consistent and stable, we could say, for example, we already have K and pre-K coming back 4 days a week. We could say, we're going to add first grade and second grade to that. Watch that, then add, third and fourth grade, watch that, then fifth, and work our way up through the grades with the focus starting at the elementary level. But the only way we would be able to do that is if we were able to keep those stable groups small. So somewhere in the chat, somebody had asked what the results are of the distance learning survey. And I have no problem sharing that information. So 21% of the student body has asked for distance learning. In our original survey of parents back at the end of June, it was 15% said they wanted distance learning. Now we're at 21%. I did close the survey on Friday. I actually closed it on Saturday. And since I've closed it, I've had people email me directly asking for me to put them on the distance learning list because the form is closed. But the reason I closed it is there's no way for principals to plan on what the class sizes would look like if that survey was open and the numbers were changing every single day. It's hard to plan when you have a moving needle. So we closed it down. The other question that had come up was, is there going to be another opportunity for people to select distance learning? We've said that all along. Once our distance learning plans are shored up, we would make those plans public. And then if people wanted to make a change, they could. And I know a lot of people are anxious to see what they look like. So I think the 21% very well may go up because I think many people are being conservative and trying to save a spot. I put that in air quotes, to save a spot on a bus, to save a spot in a classroom because they feel that if they select distance learning, they're going to be locked out, which is not the case. But, people want to err on the side of caution, so that's what they do. So the transitional plan would be moving from a hybrid model to a full return at the elementary level as long as we can keep those stable groups low. And then if you scroll through the document, and you don't have to, Jim, but if you scroll through the document, it just shows you what the model is, what the population is, what the approach is, how we're going to handle all the different parts of the scheduling, the curriculum, the screening, the group size. But this is right on our website. If you go to the re-entry documentation, it's right on the website. And then the next piece, and this is the last big one, and then I'll take questions, is, Jim, go back to the top, please. If you go to the left, you'll see that I wrote out in the next column, limited in person, 25%, partial in person, 50%. And if you scroll down a little bit, Jim, to the row that says population, so in a 50% partial model, what we would do is we would focus on, let me see here, our special populations, elementary students, pre-K to 5, and then some other programs. I know there's a number of parents that are asking about CTE and how their students are going to gain access to their CTE hands-on programming, especially when many of them have hours that they need to do to get their certifications inside their program. So obviously we'd be looking at that. If we had to do a 25% limited return, then that population shrinks down even more, and it would be just our special population students who have needs that really need to be addressed one-on-one. And then, like I said, a focus on programs that require one-on-one or hands-on teaching. And that would be the limited and the partial. And then all the way to the left is full distance learning. And that's basically what we were doing in the spring, where every student is getting distance learning and nobody's coming into school at all. Mr. Levis, is there anything I missed in that?
No, I think what's important to know is that next week, though, this is what we resubmitted to RIDE in terms of the template. But next week, we will be, at some point, putting up the individual building plans. We have a template, so there's similarities. There's been questions about distance learning, and there'll be much more information specific to what distance learning will look like, middle, the elementary, and the secondary level. Again, in the past, we put this together on March 13th. We had a week to put it together. Now we've had some time. Our schools are working really hard. If you joined us late, we had the distance learning policy that was the first reading tonight, which is on our website. So that information will be coming forward next week.
the last thing I'll say then before I take questions is a lot of people are asking why we're going through all of this. We're going through all of this scenario planning because we're required to do so. The governor and the Department of Ed has given us the charge of creating scenarios, and they have asked us to address all these different components of each scenario. We have to submit evidence and assurances for each scenario. And our schools are working at the building-based level to address all of those things because every building's slightly different. And so, you know, a lot of people have asked me personally, and like I said, through social media and email, why can't we just focus on distance learning and just do that? And it would be easy to do that. And right now, if you ask me personally, that'd be my preference because I feel like we really could do a good job with that if we had enough time to plan around it. I think we've got all the right pieces in the right places, but you know, we're working on 5 different scenarios at one time right now, and being able to focus on one obviously would be preferable. But right now, our charge is to create the scenarios that the governor's office has given us, and all the work that has to go with that. Nobody can say, the governor, nobody could say that we didn't do what we were supposed to do, or that we threw in the towel, or that we quit or gave up, because we did every single thing on this list. And I'm not saying that Warwick did. I'm just saying nobody could ever say that about us because we're following it to the T.
Don, I just want to add that there's a lot of, you know, as Lori had brought up earlier, there's a lot of out-of-the-box thinking that's taking place. And because of this, there, you know, through our surveys and just continuous dialogue, so that, you know, I've had a conversation with one of our administrators today, and all the different thinking they were to get special populations in. So there's a lot of good work that's coming out of this. And so I don't want it to be that we're just in compliance mode. We're actually thinking through our teachers, our principals, our, you know, all of our staff. Jason had mentioned our custodians, looking at the best ways to enter, exit, so that if we find ourselves in a position where we can enter school safely, there's a lot that's will be put in place. So I don't want to say that it's been a waste of effort, but I think, you know, again, we've all said today, I've said, you know, I think Don just said, if we had to make a decision today, we know that we wouldn't feel that we could enter our schools safely.
And to kind of further that point, a lot of things that we've built and worked on, we would be implementing whether we were full return or not, because some of those things are really good pedagogy, really strong outside of the box learning, especially with some of our technology. I'll take some questions if you'd like, Madam Chair.
Yes, thank you so much for this, Mr. Cowart. So I'm going to start with Mr. Florio. Any questions for our Assistant Superintendent?
No, Madam Chair, I think he laid out a very good plan. And if we can't take care of the issues that are outstanding, he is absolutely correct. The governor can't come back and say, we didn't do our due diligence. The superintendent and the assistant superintendent and the committees that are looking at the reopening of the schools are doing great work. And they understand that it all comes down to public safety. If we can't return to school and it's not safe, then we're not going to do it. And that's how I feel as a school committee member. But I believe they are working diligently and hard to make this happen. But it needs what the state is asking for, especially with the air quality. We just can't. We just can't do that. But in the meantime, Don and Craig, you're doing everything you can to try to get the schools open. And I thank you very much.
And Mr. Florio, a lot of this really sits on our principals. They've done more than the lion's share of this. I mean, we facilitate a lot of this, but our principals have been part of our big district task force, and they're all leading building level task force. So our principals really are doing the hard lift.
I thank all the principals as well, Mr. Cowart.
Thank you, Mr. Florio.
You're welcome, Madam Chair. You're welcome.
Mr. Murray.
So I'll echo the thank yous to the administration, the teachers, everyone involved in the task force on this. So one soapbox thing I guess I have is I agree with you, Don. I think it would have been more effective if the state would have stepped up early on, knowing that at a baseline, we needed an effective distance learning plan and really supported us both funding wise and resource wise to create a perfected distance learning plan so we could focus on sort of how do we transition back if we can. That said, we are where we are. So my question is, let's say our plan gets approved now that it's amended. The state comes back and says, okay, you're approved. What are the deciding factors we're supposed to look at? I mean, I know the bars have been set as far as the metrics, so operational readiness, supply, all of those. But it certainly feels like the state is pushing for us to move in a certain direction. So by that, I mean, obviously, if we're not meeting those metrics, we know funding alone is impacting those metrics. And we get an approved plan. What is the state's expectation? That we're supposed to just, somehow meet those metrics artificially? I don't know.
I wish I could get in their head and tell you what their expectation is. I'm not quite sure. I don't disagree with the diligence and the work that goes beyond, just coming up with one plan. We came up with 4 or 5 plans. There are flaws in all of them, right? There's no perfection in this. It's constantly a work in progress and a change. I think what the state level wants to be able to say is no matter what direction we go in, we're ready to go in that direction. And I think that's why the scenario planning was important for them. And so I think that's the case. And even with distance learning, I feel like we're ready to go with distance learning as well. But to your point, I would have loved to spend more time just focusing on one scenario than working on 4 or 5 at one time. I'm not saying the work wasn't important. It was super important. And I don't want Mr. Levis to think it was just about compliance, because it's not. But it is important to know that we just need to be ready. And one of the things that came up a few different times is where the decision lies. A lot of people think the decision to lie with the state and the governor and ride. Well, Warwick just showed that the decision lied with their school committee because they took a vote. And so ultimately, we have all these plans, and if they're approved, they're approved. But when the community decides what direction they're going to go in, we should be ready to go.
Don, I want to say that we've always said that, I know we've always said that we're going to make a decision. We've said that as part of the consortium. Mm-hmm. And then, we've said that, if we can't get students and staff in our schools safely, we won't get them in. And, I know as superintendent, I don't feel the pressure from the governor. I know there'll be political pressure. I know we deal with this all the time. We deal with it locally at the state level. But I think we've been crystal clear that safety is going to drive this. And we're sending a letter off as part of that consortium saying what we've said tonight, that, we need the funds, that we're concerned about air quality. We're concerned about supplies. We didn't talk about transportation tonight, but that's still an issue, especially when I brought up 30 minutes in between exchange of students on a bus. So, but we need to do due diligence, and that's important so that we, and that's what we've done. So we will, I believe, we will make the decision at the end of the day. Those last 2 metrics that we talked about, that pertains to Coventry.
No, and I agree. I think that, this goes back, I think about a month ago, I had sent off a request to put together a resolution from the school committee to the governor on this specific issue. Is that, give us the resources and fundings, you get prepared. And now it's coming to a head. I just think that the tone that was set, and this goes to my point, Don, is the comments right out of the gate were, we're going to get kids back to school, full back, instead of framing this as an effort to figure out multiple plans for that operational readiness to transition back to school. So, relieve some of the pressure on us as a school committee, because it framed it in a, this is her coming out against Warwick. Additionally frames that if you don't go along with this, now I can see her pushback on, they didn't do the alternate plans. They didn't submit a plan. So we're doing that, but ultimately we'll see where our decisions lie. I don't have any other questions. Thank you again for your work. Hopefully we get through the ride hurdle, and then we can really address the boots on the ground issues.
Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Murray. Mrs. Colonian?
No, there was a lot of hard work that went into that, and I do appreciate it, all of it. And I can echo Mr. Murray. It's like if you could have just concentrated on one plan, then do the distance learning because that's what and then you know transition back to school. You know what that's going to be like.
Yeah, and to your point, when they push back the opening a number of weeks, at the state level, they push back their decision a number of weeks. So that it doesn't really help us in terms of what the state is saying right now. Like I said, and the superintendent said, decisions at the local level could be made at any point. But the governor said now she would be saying more about the decision about schools returning the week of August 31st. So she pushed that all back. So that doesn't really put us in a much better position in terms of where they stand.
I can't understand how 2 weeks, how you can do everything in 2 weeks. I just don't understand it. But
right.
But you guys did a great job. I mean, you took the challenge, you stepped up, and thank you. I appreciate everything. Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you, Mrs. Coloni. And Mr. Pearson?
Thank you for doing this work. I know it was a challenge. And thank you for explaining something I found amusing at the time, but I know for you is not an amusing thing, where the state asked us for 3 scenarios, but they really meant 4.
Mm-hmm. Right.
I saw as soon as they published something in the paper, I said, there's 4 scenarios there, and they only asked us for 3, and I knew they would make a big to-do about it.
In a crazy way, it's become 5 because
it's 5
full,
now.
well, for us it is, right? Because it's
Yeah.
full return as they define it, hybrid transition as we define it, then there's partial, then there's limited, and then there's full distance. So we're up to 5. Next week it could be 6.
Yeah, so it's I don't know, crazy is strong a word, but it's flying by the seat of our pants, it seems like. So thank you for the hard work put into this. Clear, not clear. Hopefully we'll get some more solid decisions from the state sooner than later. As you said, I hope this 2-week delay in the school start doesn't mean they're going to delay all their other decisions by 2 weeks also, because that would be just cause us more trouble.
But like the superintendent said, we're not going to delay some of our stuff. Like we're going to get those distance learning plans and building-based plans out to our community next week, so that at least our community knows that what things look like here.
Perfect. All right, that's all I have. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Pearson. And I want to echo what everybody else has said to thank you and all the people who have worked on this, the building principals, our staff, I'm sure teachers, and central administration. I have been disappointed in what has been asked by RIDE. I will try to let them off the hook a bit just because they're running by the seat of their pants just about like everyone in this country who is responsible for jobs, kids going back to school, healthcare. We're in a tough place, and the best laid plans can blow up in a New York second, so to speak, when cases rise, when folks don't use proper precautions, et cetera, et cetera. I do wish that RIDE had taken some of the money that, or asked the governor for some of the COVID-19 money to go to work right away in March on a long distance or distance learning curriculum that was statewide, that and take that planning piece, sort of that is so critical, and do a lot of that work for districts. I know that Coventry's in a good place, but there are a lot of districts that are not in a good place with their district learning plans, just because they're barely one-to-one districts as far as devices go. So that has been a disappointment. I know that that was asked for several months ago by RIAS, for example, the Rhode Island Association of School Committees. couldn't resources be pooled so that a single distance learning curriculum could be available for all districts? But obviously that didn't happen.
There
And
was an
so we're
RFP.
left to our,
Yeah, there was an RFP that they put out looking for that. I just don't know what the results were. I asked a few times, but I don't know what the results were.
yeah, maybe it was too expensive, or who knows, but obviously it's all been left to the districts. I think it's just this passed down mentality. I mean, the federal government has passed it down to the states have passed it down to the individual towns, cities, and so it is kind of a big mess.
Yeah, and
But,
that's why I'm not too hung up on RIDE. I mean, they did what they had to do, and they
Yep.
told us what we needed to do, and that's that. I mean, and whether we're doing 3 scenarios, 4 or 5, they were given their marching orders, and they gave them to us, and we did what we were asked to do, and at least nobody could say we didn't, follow the expectation and do what we were asked to do.
yeah, I can understand the predicament you've all been in. I mean, I'm as a administrator at Brown University, I'm going through the same thing, trying to develop plans, different scenarios for in-person laboratories for biology students, and who knows if it's ever going to happen. So I've spent an incredible amount of time this summer working on guidelines for my lab that may never ever be realized because our kids won't come back. So I get all of the frustration in that, and I just am thankful that the leadership in this district has been, for the most part, upbeat and has done the work.
Yep.
So I thank you exceedingly for all the hard work.
Yeah, and I called out our principals, but one of our assistants said that means APs too. So it's assistant principals and principals and all the teachers and nurses and all support staff that were part of the different task force groups, because they really did all the work.
Yes, I appreciate all of the help, and want to thank everyone actually for this Herculean effort. So, Mr. Murphy, do we have? I don't see any hands raised.
No, it doesn't look like there are any.
Okay, all right, thank you. Then I guess we can go to 16. I know we did talk about charter review changes in our last meeting. There may be some more that I'm not 100% aware of what actually has been decided.
Because we brought it up before, there were some, the council, I believe, met with the Charter Review Commission, and they, remember they had requested information from us. I know some individual committee members shared their opinions with the Charter Review Commission. Mrs. Shockley was here. So I know there was follow-up and just an opportunity to, for the committee to, again, I have nothing to add, but if there's an opportunity just to quickly summarize what was presented, so we put it back on the agenda, so.
Okay, thank you. Were there any comments from our committee members? Mr. Florio?
No comment, Madam Chair. All I can say is what's happening to us right now is what happens when you try to make a political decision and force it on an educational system nationwide. And that's all I have to say, Madam Chair. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Florio. Mr. Murray, anything from you?
No, I just want to say that I was glad to see a few of the things from the charter review get moved forward. Term limits were not taken up. I was disappointed that they didn't take it to the voters, considering that we unanimously agreed that that was a good idea, and I think for the right reasons. I'm not sure what the premise was on the council side, but I think they could have potentially respected our opinions, and maybe it just reflected poorly that they would put forward school committee, not have council with term limits, right? But it would have been interesting to see them go ahead and do that and honor our wishes to put that forward. So I guess the only thing I'll say is hopefully the dynamic changes on the council. I am all for new blood in positions, And if I want to continue to serve, I have many opportunities to do so. So hopefully we can get that done at some other date. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Murray. Mrs. Colonian, anything from you?
Nothing from me. Oh, I just have one thing. We may have to vote to extend over 10 o'clock.
9 more minutes, we'll see.
9 more minutes.
It
Yeah,
depends
9
on
more
how.
minutes, Donna.
I'm the timekeeper. No, no.
All right, Mr. Peterson, anything from you?
No comments.
Okay. All right, we've got superintendent's report. You got about 8 minutes, Mr. Levis.
I will be quick. I just wanted to, we had tongue-tied here. Mr. Lesso was, Richard Lesso was the former food service manager for Sodexo. We now have a new food service manager, and it is David Dinnerstein. I met Dave a few times. He's taken over, working well with Kristen Morello, the regional district manager, and Sarah, myself, and Linda Ide's been working with him. So I just want to welcome him aboard. And anybody that goes to the meal site will see Dave out there serving meals Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. So that's all. I just wanted to acknowledge him, that, welcome to Coventry, and we look forward to working with him. And that is it.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Levis. I'm sure we all wish to give him welcome as well. So we're up to citizens' comments. Are there any comments from the citizens that are left on the call?
Yep, we have one. It's Kelly. Okay, Kelly, you're on. You just need to unmute.
Okay, hi, I'm Kelly Powers. I live on 8 Watercress Court. I just wanted to start by saying thank you guys very much. I appreciate all of your hard work. I honestly can't even begin to imagine how much you guys are putting into this, just even by listening, knowing. I just wanted to ask Mr. Levis if, the money that's being allocated, trickling down from federal funding, state funding, down to cities and towns, and then we have to get, after listening to Sarah's presentation about the money, do you have a specific time where you say, like, okay, we don't have enough time, and we, do you have a specific date, I guess would be my question, on when you would say, okay, this isn't going to be realistic because we don't have enough time to make sure, like, all the filtrations and, the HVAC systems and the PPEs and the nurses and the busing, like, I understand it's a great deal. But I was just wondering, because I, as everything else in 2020, for our children, prepare wise, like,
Right.
if we can mentally prepare them for this is what's going to happen.
Right. No, that's a great question. Somebody asked me that on the chat, and so just quickly, that there's a balancing act going here, because we truly believe, anybody that's involved with education, anybody that has children, we believe that we need to do everything in our power to try to get students and teachers together physically. And so there's a lot of people that are frustrated, wish we would have called a week ago, 2 weeks ago, a month ago. So we're balancing that. I think this information that came out around the air quality and having an assessment is kind of a game changer, because it could be like the straw that broke the camel's back. Because I, like many people, but I reach out. I was on a call with, a high-ranking, official today who said that we really should hear something by the end of the week, significant amount of, stimulus package. So there's always that hope. But, my feeling is by the time we have our regularly scheduled meeting in August 28th, we'll be much closer, and maybe that's not, that's too far out for individuals. But again, we have enough responsibility to do anything in our power to get people back to school safely. And so, I have no fault with the governor to do that. I believe that's our responsibility. But I also believe we're much closer to making a decision that at least right now, we don't see how that can be done safely. And there are a lot of people who disagree. But again, I think you'll see from our conversation tonight, we are doing due diligence in getting there.
I understand. Thank you. I am a teacher assistant. I work for the Coventry Public Schools. I work in intensive support. So I've been in many of the schools. So I understand the situation at task. That's why I was kind of questioning if you had, you know, like a specific, because I understand
Right.
being in a classroom. I get it. Like you know, there's a lot of people that are making decisions that aren't in a classroom that don't understand even the minute to minute, hour by hour type of situation it is.
Right.
So I just want to say thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Kelly.
Thank you, Kelly. Anybody else, Mr. Murphy?
Nope, that's it.
All right, I think we might make the 10 o'clock deadline. Is there a motion to schedule the next meeting?
Madam Chair, I make a motion that the next virtual meeting of the school committee be scheduled for Thursday, August 27th, 2020 at 6 p.m.
I second the motion.
Can we have a roll call, please?
Ms. Patno, did we, not to interrupt, but we had mentioned before about having maybe a meeting next week. I know that we.
Yeah, I don't know if we want. I don't know if we want to schedule that right now, or if you just want to send us an email to see what are best for us. If we could.
Perfect.
Okay. All right. So can we have a roll call on the schedule of the next meeting, Donna?
Kathy Patnode?
Yes.
Dave Florio?
Yes.
Luke Murray?
Yes.
Donna Colonian?
Yes.
James Pearson?
Yes.
Motion carries 5-0. Is there a motion to adjourn? I have 9:58.
Madam Chair, I make a motion that the meeting be adjourned at 9:58 p.m.
I second the motion.
Do we have a roll call on that?
Sure. Kathy Patnode?
Yes.
Dave Florio?
Yes.
Luke Murray?
Yes.
Donna Colonian?
Yes.
James Pearson?
Yes.
Thank you. Motion carries 5-0. Thank you all for attending. And we'll see you at our next meeting. Goodbye, everyone. It's lovely
Bye, Madam.
spending